What is up, everybody? Well, this is not going to be fun. Try to have energy there, and I had like zero. I'm. This is going to be an interesting post game. Unfortunately, it's going to be the last post game of the 2025-2026 season. Get in with your comments. I mean, I'll go ahead and start sharing some of my thoughts. First of all, I kind of had a feeling that Alabama was going to be aggressive early. I thought they were going to try to put Fernando Mendoza under pressure, give him some different looks, try to throw a lot at him. And that's exactly what they did. They had a lot of success, got Indiana off the field quickly. And then you're sitting there telling yourself, man, this could end up going really well for Alabama because you just completely eliminated them getting the football to start the game, and you get the football to start the second half. It's a really good start. It's as good of a start as you could ask for. Started moving the football on offense. You're thinking, okay. And then from there, things just seem to fall apart. And I'm going to have to eat some humble pie on this, guys. There's just no other way to put it. I was wrong about a lot. I started the season wrong about a lot with the team. This is not the same thing as that. Don't get me wrong. I don't think there was an effort issue. Maybe guys gave up throughout the course of the game when it was already over, but to me, it still wasn't like it was against Florida State, but it was very clear. It was very apparent who the better football team was. And I'm not even saying on this given day. I mean, that's the type of beatdown performance, running the football, playing off of that. Quarterback's making plays with his legs. He's extending. He's finding the lanes, converting defensively. They're aggressive. They're stopping the run. They're applying pressure. You know, they didn't do they did put Tai Simpson under duress, don't get me wrong, but they didn't have their first sack until, a good chunk into the game. But, yeah, going to have to own the fact that I was wrong about a lot. This is going to be fun. We're going to work our way through it together, guys. We're in it together. That's one thing I'll always say, but I very much believe in this channel. If you get something wrong, you can make claims, you can make statements, you can analyze. If you're wrong, you have to own that you were wrong. And that's exactly what I'm about to do, because this looked nothing like I thought it would to an extent. Everything that Indiana had done this season to everybody else, it all translated. The reason I didn't think it was going to look that way is because I didn't think it would translate against Alabama. What I was wrong, I was very wrong about that. And so when you've got a team that pretty much can do anything, you're in for a long day. All right, let's start talking about some of this stuff. John, appreciate the $1.99 super chat. If you want to get your comment 100% guaranteed read, I'm a one-man show. I try to work my way through the comments. Can't always do that. But one surefire way is to hit us up with a super chat, and we will make sure we get it addressed. Appreciate that, John. Cody Stevens, appreciate the $5 super chat. I do not care what anyone says. Someone better get fired after this during the offseason. This game was hot garbage. Yeah, I mean, what you can't do is you can't sit here and say things like, man, this is the healthiest we've been, and we've got some rest, had a chance to kind of regroup and do all these things. And then I understand Indiana's very, very good. All right. Like, I do not want to take away. This is one of those types of performances against Georgia. I wanted to give Georgia a lot of credit, but there were a lot of things that pointed to, okay, yes, they deserve a lot of credit, but also Alabama was really banged up. They didn't have some guys either available or 100%. This is one of those where you have zero excuses. It was so very apparent. And I'm telling you, them going for it, maybe they'll sit there and tell you, hey, we've been aggressive all season. That's who we are. That's why we went for it early in our own territory. But I'm here to tell you right now, when I saw not only that they went for it on fourth down, the way in that they tried to get the first down, doing all this different things, as far as, putting Tai Simpson out there acting like you were going to punt, and then getting up to the line of scrimmage, acting like you were going to snap it. And then you put Daniel Hill out there and he's in the Wildcat, and you're getting them to waste timeouts and do things. And then not only do you choose after going about it that way, then you choose to actually go for it, which was the shocking part to me. The East-West play call, it told me everything I needed to know. I thought going into the football game that Alabama actually might be able to run the football more effectively against Indiana than a lot of people realized. And when I saw that, I knew they had zero confidence that they could run the football in Indiana. Zero. And they were having to do a lot of cute things. That told me everything I needed to know. And they were scared to punt the football back to Indiana. You were only down 3-0. But they knew, hey, if we punt this football, it is very likely, with the way that our defense already was out there for an extended period of time, if Indiana goes on another long drive like that, we might be in trouble and be in trouble quick. And so there was this need, or they felt pressed. That's what it felt like to me. And then kicking the field goal when you finally got in scoring position. I understand it was a 4th and long. It was a 4th and definitely a pretty good ways. But when you settle for a field goal there, when it was a 3-score game and it stayed a 3-score game, that told me we don't think we're coming back. We do not have any belief that we're scoring 3 touchdowns on this bunch and we're converting 3 2-point conversions. We're just trying to make this less embarrassing. That's what that told me. So 2 different points. Cody, to get back to what you were saying, I do think you are going to see some sort of changes. I do. I don't know what those changes necessarily are going to look like. I have some idea. I don't really want to be public and share some of that because, I could be wrong. And if I'm wrong, I don't want to put that out there. But I do think some changes need to be made. I really do. Because there's a lot about this coaching staff that I've said that is exciting and I like about this staff, but there are some alarming things. You go back to Oklahoma last year. You go to kind of how the score didn't reflect it because the offense was able to kind of match Vanderbilt, blow for blow in a lot of after getting down early. But in a lot of ways, it just felt like you were manhandled, at least one side of the football. But against Oklahoma, the way you were dominated on the scoreboard, against Florida State, a team that ended up being 5-7, the way that you were dominated to some extent on the scoreboard, how it looked in the SEC championship against Georgia, how it looked tonight or today. These are things that's like, that's a red flag. That's a big red flag. And we'll talk about some of the mistakes that I think Alabama might have made going into the season, things they were wrong about, things they were stuttering about. We're going to be covering all of it. It's going to be a long show. So we'll get to that stuff. But Cody, I do think you end up seeing some sort of changes. John, appreciate the $1.99 super chat. Cannot believe we got outmanned. I don't know what. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty shocked too. But what I will say is Curt Signetti, guys, I said this before. I think he's a little goofy. He's a little bit of a goofier version. And once again, I said earlier, I mean, no disrespect by saying that. He just beats to a different drum. But he's got some Nick Saban tendencies, and they were talking about that during the broadcast. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out. I mean, the fact that he's in there and he's not playing mind games, but you can tell. Kalen DeBoer was very content, very, very content with the preparation that he had seen and the execution and the energy and all these things. I don't want to get too overly critical here, but Signetti, I don't know if Signetti just has that much higher of a standard. And that might have been, with his time that he spent with Nick Saban, he knows what it's supposed to look like, and he has certain demands. But it was so very clear that Kalen DeBoer was very accepting of the game plan going in, guys' energy, didn't think that anybody was, he thought they were in a really good place. Now, he did admit that the execution in practice, maybe there was some, they wasn't perfect, but he felt good about the energy and effort and all those things. And Signetti is concerned. And then you see what you saw from both teams tonight. That is so telling to me. And so a lot of this, I mean, and I know that a lot of times Alabama fans don't want to give, first of all, Indiana fans have been running their mouth for the last 2 weeks. And granted, I chirped back a little bit. I've got to own it because everything they said they were going to do to Alabama, they did and more. So when that happens, you don't have a choice. You can run from it. I'm not going to. I'm going to own it. And but it was rough. But Alabama's got to make some changes. It was so clear that Indiana was the better football team on both sides of the football. They had better execution. They had a better game plan. Alabama is so limited. And when you go up again, this is what Nick Saban was known for. You could be really, really, really good at a few things, whether it be offensively or defensively. But when you ran into Nick Saban's Alabama, if you didn't have all of your ducks in a row, he was going to exploit what you weren't good at. And in some ways, the completeness of Alabama is where they overwhelmed teams and they dominated teams. And right now, that is what Indiana just did to Alabama. That is so shocking to say because it's Indiana. And I'm being real here. I, once again, don't mean that as disrespect. For them, that's so awesome. Like it is. Because that's a program like Vanderbilt in the season they just had. Like I'm sure their fans are pumped. And I know it didn't finish the way they wanted it to, but there's a lot to be excited about. But Indiana right now is doing something that's special. That is very, very, very special. I want to give them all the credit in the world for that. Alabama was outmanned, John. They 100% were. Whew, this is going to be not a fun one. All right, Perry, appreciate the $5 super chat, brother. DeBoer has to reevaluate. Look at his losses. Michigan ×2, Oklahoma ×2, Georgia, Vandy, FSU, Tennessee, USC this year. Out physicaled both ways. His style struggles in these games. Guys, this comes down to Alabama never could run the football all season. And granted, it felt like at times they were trying to force it too much, but I also think the coaching staff understood how bad that could get if they couldn't ever get a run game going. And we also talked about going in that Indiana is one of the best as far as eluding blocks and getting off blocks, and Alabama's inability to sustain them all year at pretty much most positions on offense. That did concern me. And boy, did that come to fruition. They did a phenomenal job. And I never brought up the size discrepancy because I understood that means nothing. I've watched Indiana and the way that they play. And when it comes to, they got 60 pounds across the board on all these, doesn't matter. That's not how I thought Alabama was going to win because if they hadn't lined up all year and out physical teams and outmanned them and been just bigger and stronger and pushed certain guys around, they never pushed anybody around. So I didn't think, I don't care if you're 370 pounds. That just to me, I do think there were some limitations this year that for one reason or another, and you've got to start evaluating your coaching staff because, yes, you might not have some of the pieces that you want to have, and that might be limiting in some ways. But the bottom line is it shouldn't look. The run game should never look how it looked this season. It should never reach that point. Not at a place like Alabama. I mean, and Georgia went through something relatively similar, last year under Kirby Smart. It was not to this extent. Really not close. But, I mean, even the best of the best right now, sometimes they have these type of deficiencies. What makes Kirby Smart, the reason Georgia is Georgia right now is because in the offseason, they fixed it. Now, I'm not saying that they have one of the top 5 rushing offense, but when they want to run the football, they can run the football. And they have made such improvement on that front. And while I have tremendous amount of respect for Gunnar Stockton, I think that if he was dropped at Alabama and any of the 3 quarterbacks at Alabama was dropped at Georgia, I think you would see polar opposite. I think Gunnar Stockton would not have a lot of success in Tuscaloosa. And I think any quarterback that you dropped over there in Athens would have way more success. And the reason for that is because of their ability to actually run the football. It is so limiting when you can't do that. And all season, and granted, you try to come up with reasons to be optimistic and you're trying to look at the positives, and that's always been me. But it was very clear. It is very clear that super limiting. And it's okay. That they've accepted it. They got to figure out ways around it. But everybody who said it was going to bite Alabama, they were 100% right. Brandon from DC, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Clint, I'm Mr. Optimistic, but we must make coaching changes this offseason. New offensive line and running back coaches. Once Tai turned that ball over, it was a wrap. I agree, and I tweeted that same thing, Brandon. Because that was the momentum changer. It was so very clear prior to that point that Indiana was the much better football team. But I don't think I think Alabama was doing just enough where they were hanging around. And if Indiana could have ever started to feel any of that pressure, you just don't know how it will end up looking. You really don't. But when that was the type of drive where it's like, okay, it's getting closer to the half. Alabama gets the football to start the second half. They're starting to work their way down the field. And if they can they were down 10-0 at that point. If they can put a field goal, which field goal is not great, but if you can make it 10-3 or 7-10, or excuse me, 10-3 or 10-7, and then you can come out in the second half and get something going, maybe tie the football game up or whatever, completely different ball game. And as soon as he fumbled that football, you're right, it was a wrap. It was done. And someone on Twitter, and I understand their logic, but they were like, because earlier in the game, when he got pulled backwards by the defender, looked like he slid. My argument was he needed to dip his shoulders. He needed to put his shoulders down and go ahead and dive. If he would have done that earlier when he was only about 1.5, 2 yards away from the first down, more than likely he gets the first down, and the defender never has the ability to pull him backwards where it makes him look like he slides. I understand he was banged up. He has been banged up all season. It reached a point on that fumble where he needed to be removed from the football game. But I said that he needed to put his shoulders down and do what it took to get the first down, given, it's like you got to have it. Well, then once he did get the first down and then he got the football knocked loose, a lot of people were saying, hey, everybody wanted him to dip his shoulder and get the extra yardage. Well, he just did it. And this is why you don't ask him to do that. Two very different situations. In one situation, he was short of the first down. It was very apparent that he was short of the first down. You got to have the situational awareness. You got to do what you can to get the first down. The other one, he was 5 yards past the first down marker. And as soon as he got the first down, at that point, especially if you are banged up, that's when you go to the ground. That's when you slide. That's when you give up. Don't try to be a hero. I understand that he's just a guy trying to make a play in that moment, but it was tough. It was really, really tough because that fumble, any chance that Alabama had in that football game, as much as it was just not going their way, it ended with that fumble. Obviously, the fourth down, not only the play call, but the decision to go for it on fourth down, that played a massive part. Those are the two biggest things. But Tai Simpson and that fumble, that was rough. As far as the offensive line and running back coaches, I'll put it this way. They have to be better on the offensive line in 2026. It's not optional. I don't know if it's literally axing everybody. I'm saying extreme to paint a picture. I don't actually mean this, but it's like, I don't care what it takes. You must be better. You have to be able to run the football better. You got to get more production from your running backs. You got to get more production and sustainability from your offensive line. I'm still baffled at how bad it has looked. And, I will admit fully that I think that does come down to coaching in a lot of those instances. It's bad. It's really, really bad. Justin Pearson, appreciate the $4.99 super chat, and also appreciate you always on Twitter, brother. A lot of you guys always contribute, and I appreciate that. But JP definitely is always around and chiming in, and I don't always get a chance to respond to everybody, but I certainly notice and I certainly appreciate it. He says, Clint, that fourth down play just completely changed everything. It was the decision to go. It was how it looked. I don't even remember what all went down. I just remember it's like tied. If I'm not mistaken, they show the Wildcat look with Daniel Hill. Then they might bring out the punt team, but then Ty's in there, and then they switch things up and they try to draw them off sides. And then you go back to I was just glad because all of that took a while. Like Indiana had to call a timeout. So in my mind, I'm like, it was good that you did that because you made them waste a timeout and you gave your defense a little bit of an extra break. Like you did go out, 3 and out relatively quickly. But, just doing all of that stuff, it did get by the defense a little bit more time. And then when they decided to go for it, I'm like, what are you doing? I understand the aggressiveness. I wouldn't say that I was shocked necessarily that they went for it, but it's just like if you could run the football and the opposing defense knew that you could run the football, I would love that aggressiveness. Even in that, a lot of people wouldn't, but even in that situation where you're pretty, 30-something yard line, your own 30-something yard line, they would have, but not only did you don't have the ability to run the football, and because of that, you felt the need to do what they did. Just none of it made sense. None of it made sense. It did change everything. I'm still trying to wrap my mind around some of this stuff, guys. So this is going to be, I might get lost as we're trying to. Sometimes I can pitch this to other people. It is what it is. James Jones, appreciate the $2 super chat. DeBoer isn't worth a damn. Grubb at a minimum. Once again, I'm not going to bail on this coaching staff, but I can't fault anybody for being super frustrated. I mean, it's frustrating. And I'm sure right now, maybe right by now, DeBoer's probably sharing that frustration with people as well. The bottom line is I know that they put a lot of emphasis on trying to be tough in the offseason. They put those guys through the ringer. It wasn't that they were soft. What's funny is Kurt Signetti had talked during these bowl press conferences about how he doesn't really put his players through a lot as far as the workouts and stuff. He doesn't want to get guys hurt. There's a lot that goes into it. In some ways, I think that Alabama could have pushed some of these guys too far. But the toughness is not just about, hey, I can take my helmet and I can run into this brick wall 50 times and I'll run into it another 50 without hesitation because I'm just that tough. I tried to play that way when I played football. I did. Like one of the things, back when you used to see all the dots after a big hit, I took pride in the fact that I felt like I was tougher than everybody else. I'll put my face mask into your face mask as hard as I possibly can, and it will phase me 10 times less than it phases you. I've learned later on that was incredibly stupid of me. But there is mental toughness as well. There is a mental toughness aspect that I feel like that you can't get by being just super hard on everybody. It's putting them in situations that require them to be extremely tough, but not from a physical standpoint, not hitting each other as hard as you possibly can in practice. It is straining the mind, pushing it, and not only having guys rely on each other, but having to kind of rely on themselves and kind of bow up in very uncomfortable situations. And right now, I just don't feel like Alabama is mentally tough enough. That's how I'll put that. And that's got to change moving forward. You got to make the necessary changes. IMB, appreciate the $2 super chat. Really was a lack of fundamentals and effort. I didn't, maybe I go back and I watch and we notice some things. It's like, man, the effort was a big problem. I didn't really see anything crazy. I don't think, Ty's not showing effort because he didn't dive for that first down. I just think that in the moment he made a bad call, but he's doing everything he can. That's exactly why a few plays later, a couple of drives later, he's trying to make a play and he ends up fumbling the football. Fundamentals, I do think there have been some issues there, but I don't want to question the effort unless I have something very concrete, because I saw what a lack of effort looked like against Florida State, and just watching it live, I didn't see that. But maybe it's possible I also was like trying to wrap my mind around the entire thing, what I was even watching. So maybe I go back and I realize, yeah, they did have some massive problems. But appreciate the $2 super chat for sure. Myra Aurora, hope I said that correctly. Appreciate the $5 super chat. I feel bad for the fans that traveled out to California to watch this game. We can say that. Yeah. I mean, I feel bad for them as well. That's a lot of money. And to go out there and get embarrassed, and I'll go ahead and tell you, it's worse for Alabama fans to get embarrassed like that, because can someone honestly tell me when's the last time Alabama was beat down that badly? 44-16 in the national championship. Like, that's from a point spread perspective. That's pretty rough as well. But I mean, everybody who watched that game knew it was some plays that didn't break their way. Tua making an uncharacteristic early throw that you didn't need to make, pick six. These types of things contribute. This was a complete beatdown in all three phases for 3 quarters, 3.5 quarters. I would probably say 3.5. From the time that they went on that like 8-minute drive or whatever in the first quarter and got a field goal, I mean, I would say it was starting there. But I can't tell you the last time I saw Alabama get beat down like that. Georgia did not beat Alabama down like that. They beat Alabama down. They did. And that one was rough too. It didn't touch this. It wasn't even close to touching this. That's like, you be aggressive, you block a punt early. Tai Simpson throws an interception. Like, it's things like that that really allowed Georgia. Georgia didn't do a lot offensively to get the points that they got. Indiana said, give it to us on the 2-yard line. We don't care. We'll go 98 yards right down your throats, and we'll do what we want to while we do it. That's a different breed of ass kicking. I mean, it is. I haven't seen that in a very long time. So, yeah, I mean, I agree. I think it's pretty rough that fans spent a lot of money to get out there and then had to watch that. Low balling goalish. Appreciate the $9.99 super chat. Just left the game, Clint, and currently riding the shuttle back to my truck to Dodger Stadium. And I can honestly say I just saw a coaching malpractice I never thought possible under DeBoer. I'm shocked. I think shock is the way that a lot of fans are feeling right now. Shocked is a good way to put it. Disbelief. It reached a point, and I give Indiana credit, because they beat Alabama down so bad that I was able to wrap my mind around it quicker. Like it was just, it got almost comical. Didn't do a whole lot of laughing, but in my mind, I was like, this is crazy. It is rough. It's rough because you started the season this way, and then you ended the season this way. And once again, don't think it was an effort problem as much in this game. But you exit a game feeling a way that you haven't really felt as an Alabama fan for a long time, and certainly not from my perspective where I'm covering the team, and you really are diving. I spend a lot of energy and effort diving. Sitting here saying that they were going to be aggressive and get after the quarterback or get after Fernando Mendoza and kind of go hunting. It's like, figuring out that they are going to try to do those things. I put a lot of effort into it, and just not seeing this coming. I've never experienced this since I've started covering Alabama, and since I even got into this business. It is different. But once again, right now we're going to complain about the problems. We're going to. Tomorrow, the transfer portal opens, and once again, there's still going to be probably a little complaining from me. Some things that I'm frustrated about. I'm going to go back and watch the film. I'm not going to like it, but I'm going to want to understand. I have a good idea of what needs to change, what probably needs to change, but I'm going to try to dive in and see what I can to figure out solutions. And we're going to go to work. And I mean, I'm not the one making the decision, so they could completely go against anything that I want or say, but I'm at least going to share with you guys what I think about it and see if, they follow some of it and how much they can get back on track, because that's all we can do. I mean, that's all we can do at this point. Bozano Vadude. Once again, I botch names really bad. I'm one of those sounded out kind of guys. And man, I apologize if I botched that. Appreciate the $4.99 super chat though. This coaching staff was outcoached and outclassed. DeBoer's teams have always been trash at running the ball. We got ran. We're cooked. They had a complimentary run game at Washington, enough that can be effective. When you say they're trash at running the ball, I wouldn't agree with that. I think Grubb in Seattle had a really rough run game. I think some of that was a lack of a commitment to it. But I think at Washington, it was not any sort of dominant run game. It certainly wasn't up to a lot of people's SEC standards, but they got enough out of their run game. where it was a threat, and you always had to take that into account. I'm going to go ahead and tell you, if they didn't have a threat for a run game, they would have never been as successful as they were at Washington offensively. Michael Penix would not have had the success that he had. Rome Odunze, like all of those NFL dudes that they had, and Ryan Grubb, like they would have not have had the level of success they did if they wouldn't have had a respectable run game. This was not a respectable run game. And it wasn't, it didn't matter. You throw Jam back there, throw Kevin Riley, throw Daniel Hill, try different offensive line combinations, try different guys at tight ends. I understand guys were banged up at times, and that does impact things. But you saw it for 15 games. You saw what it was. And while they would show glimpses and start moving in the right direction, it was one step forward, two steps back, pretty much every step of the way. And that's why you got to say, you've got to do some soul searching. You've got to figure out what you're going to do to get this fixed, because this coaching staff put a tremendous amount of effort into trying to fix it this entire season. I know that for a fact. During bye weeks, they try to get better at it. During these long layoffs, they try to get better at it. And it made little to no difference. So the one thing you couldn't really change, maybe you could try some different things, but that you couldn't really change is personnel. Like you have on the roster who you have on the roster. They've got to go out there and do what they need to do. And I think Xavier Crowell is a great step in that direction. I really do. I think at the running back position, I think that he is really going to help that aspect. And we'll be talking about that more throughout the offseason. But with the offensive line, the portal, you've got to go get some dudes, man. You have to. They need to fit schematically. It can't be this hodgepodge where you're kind of just piecing it together. Get guys who are good at doing the same thing, pretty much, and get them doing that thing. But you have to be better. And if it's a new offensive line coach, it's getting a new offensive line coach. If it's getting a new running backs coach, it's getting a new. I'll leave that up to DeBoer. Now, granted, I'll react whatever decision he makes on that. If I agree with it, I'll say that. And if I disagree, I'll say that as well. But, I mean, this is not the type. It's a very successful season. I think at the end of the day, when you put on paper what they achieved, I think it was steps in the right direction. But for anybody who watched this year and you actually paid attention in these games, you know that while on paper everything looks a lot better, you know there's some big red flags. And the coaching staff doesn't need to look at what's on paper and what looks good. They got to understand what they saw with their own eyes. Their coaches, they know what to look for. They know what's expected. And you fell very, very short in certain elements of this team for the entirety of the season. And you've got to do whatever you can as a coach. If you're Kalen DeBoer and you are the head honcho, you got to step up and do what is necessary to get that fixed. Kirby Smart did it, and I'm not saying that Kalen DeBoer has to be Kirby Smart, but I'm saying it is possible to get this stuff corrected in a massive way in a single offseason. And Alabama's got the talent to do it. I don't know what's going to happen with the transfer portal. You get beat down like this, and there's a lot of fan reaction and emotion. I have no idea what's going to happen. We'll address that as it comes as well. But you have enough talent in Tuscaloosa. You do, to where it should not look how it has looked for the entirety of this season. Wayne's 1348. Appreciate the 199 super chat. Next couple of weeks will be intriguing. It will. Yeah, I'm kind of excited about it because I do believe in this coaching staff overall still. I still do believe in Kalen DeBoer and Courtney Morgan. And I'm going to trust that they all do what is necessary to get this stuff corrected. But I'm excited to see what they feel like that is. I might be sitting there, as a fan, you might be sitting there saying they have to hire a new offensive line coach. You don't have another choice. Well, maybe Kalen DeBoer feels that way. Maybe he doesn't. And if he doesn't, we'll be reacting to that. But I'm just curious to see what they feel like, because they're not going to do things based off of what you or I want. That's where we're going to start. But also with the transfer portal, what do they attack? How do they attack it? Why are they? I'm going to be breaking all of this down. I always try to get into the minds of the decision makers, and with like Kalen DeBoer and Courtney Morgan and all these guys. I mean, you go out and you add Ford out of the transfer portal already. What did that tell us? I mean, it said pretty much, hey, you really you didn't get from a blocking standpoint what you needed to get out of that position. and they go out and they get a guy who's got a ton of upside as a blocker, and he's got a little bit of upside as a pass catcher. But the fact they went out and they also added him when they did, it's like this was an early priority for them. That's something that I wouldn't have put at the very tip top of the list. I would have made the list, but I think there was a reason that it kind of played out the way that it did. We're going to be breaking all that stuff down, and it's going to be fun. It is. It's. There's a lot of concern. We're not going to sugarcoat anything, but I mean, I am excited to see how they try to attack the problems, because that's what they were hired to do. They're coaches. I mean, it's not always going to be easy. D Kilgo, appreciate the $5 super chat. Grubb has to go. Here's what I don't know. I have a lot of respect for what Grubb did at Washington. I know that there was a reason that he was able to make as a coordinator the jump from the college level to the NFL level, because people on that level very much respected his offensive mind. I think he did have problems this year. I'm not going to shy away from that. I wonder how much of it was just him not feeling like he could do certain things or not having the confidence to do it. But I think at times he kind of got in his own head. I think at times he was too cute. It was, I don't know. I feel like there was a lot of attempted compensation for shortcomings of Alabama's offense. And some of it may have been necessary, but some of it may have not been necessary. I'm not ready to give up. Grubb's been there for a year, so I'm not ready to give up on him just yet. If Kalen DeBoer, maybe they just decide this is not working out. Like, I don't know. But from my standpoint, I don't think it would be beneficial for Alabama at this point. Who are you going to go get? It's a new you're already losing Nick Sheridan. You're already losing one of those guys that has built the relationships with Austin Mack and, Tai Simpson potentially, and Keelan Russell, and a lot of these guys. Like, I don't know. And once again, this will probably be a situation where DeBoer looks at it, and if he feels like it's a Grubb problem, maybe he's willing to part ways with a good friend. But if he doesn't feel like it's a Grubb problem, you're not going to see that, and they're going to try to fix it in other ways. I'm going to trust DeBoer right now to do that, but I am perked up a little bit, and I am watching very closely to see how they feel like they should fix some of this stuff. Toast, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Canceling my yay Alabama as we speak. They don't deserve my money with the effort they gave. Do you feel like it was a lack of effort? I mean, I think a lot of people do feel that way, but I want to be crystal clear. And I did say on Twitter, I said Alabama deserved this ass kicking. And the reason that I said that is not they gave zero effort. They deserve everything they're getting. It is you had clear problems that you never addressed properly. And as a coaching staff, I understand that sometimes you are who you are. You have on the roster who you have on the roster. But to me, with what Alabama had available, it should have never been this bad. And so I just don't feel like they did enough in season. That is concerning. That is once again a red flag. But I understand that what people are going to do is they're going to say, hey, if you're not giving me what I feel like I deserve as a fan, then I'm going to withdraw my support. And I understand that, but you got to understand that this is how things can continue to spiral. This doesn't feel very good. So if you want it to not feel this way, I don't think everybody pulling funds and stuff and them having less resources to work with, I don't think that's going to help. You know what I'm saying? In fact, I think it'll make it continue to go in the direction. You're going to see this more often. And you might be sitting there telling yourself, well, I'm not convinced that it's not going to happen regardless. Maybe, I disagree, but if you're going to support, you got to support through the rough times. And Alabama fans have not seen a whole lot of rough times in the last 2 decades. So it takes a lot more discipline to remain supportive. But just understand what, in the grand scheme, if you're ready to be done with being a fan, you're ready to pull out and say, I don't care. Okay, that's one thing. But if you actually are saying, I'm pulling my support, but I still want you guys to do well, understand you're making it that much harder on them. That's my 2 cents on it. That's the way I've always viewed it. Not everybody will feel that way. I guarantee you, I'm not even in the comments, the regular comments right now. I guarantee you there are a bunch of people roasting me for that. That's how I feel about it. And I'm going to stay committed to that. Thunder Bar, appreciate you being here. First of all, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. DeBoer has to reevaluate coaching expectations and staff's performance and practice habits. This team looked deflated after the first bad decision. DeBose like Ron Zook could recruit. We got Signetti. First of all, that's pretty fair across the board because they did look defeated. And this is also, it was the decision to go for it on fourth. And then it was the decision to kick the field goal where it's like this, that kind of told me what this coaching staff thought about this team's ability to win this game. But it was also things like you're talking about where after the first against Oklahoma, they were able to rally because they felt like, hey, Oklahoma's very limited. They're very limited offensively. We just keep playing ball on that side on defense. And, offensively, we got to do some things, but they fully believed in their ability to come back. It didn't. Okay, I say that. Maybe they felt like they had the ability to come back until that fumble from Tai, and then after that, it was completely gone. I still don't know what would have happened had they been able to drive down the field and get points. Not saying they would have won. Not saying that they wouldn't have got blown out. I'm saying that was the moment to me where it's like, okay, in some of these games, it looked really rough against Oklahoma too. It's 3 and outs on offense. It's them driving down the field. It looked rough, and yet they were able to right that ship. And so maybe they had this belief that they could still come back and still start to get things going. But after that Tai fumble, and I think that aggravated whatever injury he's been dealing with, he was in and out of the medical tent. He was having trouble getting any sort of torque on the football. He was in a lot of pain. I think at that point, this team was like, yeah, we're done. And I think that was very apparent after the fact. But it as a staff, you do have to reevaluate how you approach this offseason because everything you thought you did last year, instilling toughness and stuff, trying to get the most in shape, and you're looking at all these numbers that's showing you effort level. And, man, that's great. But a lot of these staffs didn't have that, and they could kind of tell. Sometimes it's just using your own eyes and seeing, I see toughness in this guy. I don't need a pad with numbers on it to tell me this guy's tough and that he's giving a lot of effort. I'm watching him, and I know that he's giving effort. I don't know. I think there's a balance there. I'm not one of these guys that's like, oh, forget all the new – there's benefits to it. But I also think there's something called using your eyes as a football coach and having a pulse for your team, and an iPad's not going to tell you all of that. And maybe he felt like he was, but they've got to change some things. That's the bottom line. SK, appreciate the $5 super chat. Offensive line, special teams, and offensive coordinator got to be fired. Tai ain't it. I don't know what to make of Tai. I really don't, because I don't think he's been healthy. I really don't. And granted, I thought he was a lot closer to being healthy, but I'm telling you, if he was as banged up as some people have speculated or reported, and I will say I've not been told anything concrete. I have been told simply, yes, he has been banged up, and he's been banged up for a while. That's just what I've been told. If it was as bad as some people have speculated, then it was never going to be something that went away during the season. And it was just going to be something that he had to play through. We could get better, get closer. And so it's tough to evaluate. But what I will say is, as bad as I hate it for Tai, when Austin Mack came in, he came in against a really tough defense in a very tough situation. Alabama was getting rocked. A lot of his teammates on offense in a lot of ways maybe not already given up, but were pretty close. Maybe they had already given up. It was just a bad situation. Part of the reason that I'm not entirely sure that the decision to go to Austin Mack was not made rather than going to Keelan Russell, because if you put a true freshman out there, it's someone that you feel like is your future, and then he just gets absolutely destroyed. Once again, you're killing confidence. What, you're down by a ton of points. Are you really coming back? So when they sent out Austin Mack, a lot of people were talking to me, and I was texting people, and a lot of people were shocked that it was Austin Mack and not Keelan Russell. Number one, I think that Austin's much better than given credit for, but two, I also think it's possible that they wanted to protect Keelan. I think that's a scenario. So I don't know. I think it was very clear when Austin Mack came in, he was not overwhelmed. Blindside that what they were doing is they were simulating pressure and then dropping guys out. They were bringing multiple bodies from his backside where he couldn't see. overwhelming that side of the line of scrimmage, and they got him on multiple sacks. Like, that's just good game planning, good defense, knowing where you're going to be weak. And they say young quarterback, is he able to feel things from the backside when he can't see it? Does he have that presence about him yet as a player? Like, that's just good coaching. But overall, Austin Mack did not look overwhelmed to me, and it was a tough situation for him to come in. And that just, as I'm watching him do some of the things, just adding the rushing element, like his legs, he looked healthy. He was willing to put his shoulder down. I was just looking and I'm like, I know Ty's mobile. Like, I know he's got this same ability in him, but has, because of injury, has that hindered his ability to turn to his legs more. But what was evident is that just with some of the deficiencies, especially going against an Indiana style of defense, having that ability with your legs to add in to compensate I was just watching it and saying, this could have been useful at other points late in the season, and if he would have been given time, because Ty wasn't 100% healthy, or maybe you lose a game, you don't even make it to the college football playoff. But it's also possible that he's not overwhelmed. He has some growing pains, but you make up for it. You figure out ways to win. You rally around him. And by the time that this game rolls around, you're a much more threatening offense that's not as limited, because he brings a little bit more from a torque standpoint, on his throws. And once again, part of me is saying that knowing that Ty is not 100%, so it's hard to compare. So saying Ty ain't it, I'm not saying that you're wrong. I'm saying I don't know if you're right, I guess is my point. But either way, the coaching staff will know, I guess. It just was unfortunate this season, how everything worked out. Offensive line, special teams. Look, special teams, once again, Connor Talty came out there and he made kick. Good for him. Was glad to see that for him. I thought Blake Dowd, he had some good punts early. But special teams just hadn't been very impactful at all. Pretty much across the board. You've lost way more than you've won on that front. If they choose to go in a different direction as a result of that, I can't blame them. If they feel like he can right the ship, then I don't necessarily agree with it, but it is what it is. Zach Anthony, appreciate the $1.99 super chat. Mattress Matt, appreciate the $5 super chat. I'm tired of hearing excuses for Grubb. You've been the biggest Grubb excuser, supporting his drop back pocket sitting offense. No more BS, Clint. Matt, sure, you can say that it's excuses if you want to. But what I'm looking at is saying I've watched Alabama not be able to run between the tackles all year. They haven't been able to run the football consistently all year. That's a coaching problem. We can have that conversation. But if you're watching it over and over, and then you watch them do something cute on a fourth down play call, it's like, well, I mean, what are you doing? You call and run up the middle? You're going to run between the tackles? You haven't been able to do it. So, I mean, if you have a quarterback that can't throw the football more than 20 yards downfield, are you going to go throw a bunch of vertical shots? Or are you going to, work around what you've got? I mean, so like this whole drop, and this has been something that he has been every step of the way. But what I'll go ahead and tell you is you can't blame him when his entire offense is built around the drop back passing and you don't have a run game. He has had a complimentary run game, at least at a lot of these other stops and where he's been, where he could rely on it more. But if you don't have that element of your offense available, what do you want him to do? Do you want him to just run 57 times a game and not be a drop, just so you feel better about them not being a drop back passing offense? But you can't run the football. My point is, I'm not defending Grubb. I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm saying I can understand where it's like, they're not running the football very effectively. They haven't all year. You want them to call a bunch of runs? Because there was several points in that football game today where I'm like, don't go out there and run on first and second down. What are you doing? You can't run. I understand that sucks. We would love to see him run and have some success, but you just can't do it. Stop doing it, committing to it to that extent. If you want to sprinkle some in there to make them respect it, you get the looks that you want, you try it, I get it. But don't do it too much. I'm not going to say those types of things and then in the same breath, or talk out the other side of my mouth and say, Well, I mean, I hate your offense being it's drop back passing without a complementary run game. So the drop back passing is not going to be very effective, is my entire point. So I'm not trying to BS you, but that's my opinion. I mean, it is what it is, and you're completely entitled to yours. I have no problem with that. But you're not changing my mind, and it's not me trying to make excuses. I'm trying to explain. Jim L, appreciate the $2 super chat. Have you had enough of DeBoer yet, Clint? No. I will say there's some red flags, though. I mean, there's no way that you can't. I mean, like I said earlier, and I understand you probably did this probably a while ago. Yeah, this was 6:20 something. Yeah, this is over half an hour ago. I'm trying to get through these. I'm a long-winded guys. I'm sorry. But have I had enough of DeBoer? No, but there's some concerns. I was excited this second season. I was very excited. And I just thought, hey, I think quarterback play caller marriage is a lot more aligned on paper. You got a lot of talent with your offensive line. You had some continuity there. I mean, like I said, going into the season, you had your left tackle back. You had your starting center back. At the time, you had your starting right guard back. Wilkin Formby had started a couple of games for you last season. Gino Vandermark had played a lot and even started some games for you at guard. You bring in Cam Dewberry, who has SEC experience, and he's a big body guy, former 4-star recruit from a fit, a schematic fit standpoint. Maybe I had some questions, but I'm looking at this group and I'm looking at guys like Will Sanders, who I really liked, Joe Ionata I really like, and Jackson Lloyd and Michael Carroll, where they recruited well. And I'm sitting there saying, I think this offensive line can be pretty good. And then it just it doesn't end up being good at all. I say good at all. It's better than a lot of teams have. But when you start playing the Indianas or the Georgias, your offensive line is at a massive disadvantage in those games. And really, it didn't matter who you played. You struggled to run the football. It didn't matter who you lined up across from. There are red flags here is my point. And I'm not going to ignore those. But I also want to give DeBoer a chance because while all last offseason, a lot on paper made a lot of sense to me. And they did at least get one win in the college football playoff to advance. It's a step in the right direction. You made it to the SEC championship. You won 11 games. That's certainly an improvement. That's a 2-game improvement from a year ago. I mean, I don't know. I'm not ready to – I haven't had enough of them yet. Cody Stevens, appreciate the $5 super chat. After all year, Ty's randomly hurt. Seems like when you know you ain't going to win, might as well throw another QB in there. I do think Ty tried to play through some things. I think some of his limitations, some of his struggles, I guess I should say, it went beyond the injury. Now, granted, I do think the injury might have played a part from a confidence standpoint. When you feel like you're limited physically, it can affect the mental side of things. But seeing Austin Mack today, while it wasn't perfect, I do think there was potential there. And I understand that Ty's the guy that you named the starter. You rode with him through Florida State, and then he started looking like one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football. Flat out, he did. People were talking about him being the number 1 overall pick. What he was doing well translates extremely well. The difference, everybody was talking about Jalen Milroe and the fact that he was trending, this guy's being projected to go number 1 overall after the performance against Georgia, and we're all praising him and stuff. But what Jalen was doing now in today's more modern NFL, mobility at the quarterback position is beneficial, very powerful runner, can handle volume, great arm, a lot of great tools. And you watch guys like Anthony Richardson go top 5, and you're like, I mean, these tools, these quarterbacks, coaches, and NFL teams, they'll take chances on guys like this. But Ty's was more of how he wins is you kind of know what you're getting, and it's very translatable. And so that's why, I think there was more legitimacy to, I think that Ty, despite what you saw this year, I still think there's going to be first-round talk around him. Don't know that he would go first round, but I don't think that, and I guess the same was true for Jalen Milroe because of the tools. But I understand that it's all tough. It's tough to kind of move off of a guy like that because he's trying to play through it. But just seeing Austin Mack, I just wonder what could have been. And it's not Todd's. I don't think it's Todd's fault, or at least not all of Todd's fault. I feel like that it would have been through injury, but I wish they would have tried somebody else a little bit more. Kelly Hart, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. DeBoer better use the word embarrassing. I need strong language and strong actions now through the offseason. I'm with you on that. I think that's fair. It is embarrassing. What else are you going to call it? You know, it is straight up embarrassing. It's unacceptable. It needs to, like, and I'm not a coach. I'm not in there rallying the troops or doing it, but there needs to be a sense of urgency about this. The coaching staff needs to understand how, and I'm sure they do, but how alarming this is. It's 38-3. You got waxed. And it wasn't some fluky, crazy, yeah, the fumble helped, I guess. Indiana lined up and whipped you in every phase possible. And what it showed, these types of games, what it will show you, and Georgia to an extent did the same thing, you are not an elite football team, and you aren't even close. This is what elite football looks like. Georgia, and I say elite, Georgia is certainly in that category. I mean, and I still feel like Georgia could win it all, to be honest. But Alabama's not even close. And if you can't look at that based off of the standard, you know you have a ton of work to do because people aren't going to accept what they're seeing. You just went 11-4. You went to the second round of the college football playoff. You just went to the SEC championship. And there's a lot of pissed off people right now because once again, it didn't look how it's supposed to look. And what it tells you is that while you got closer on paper, and we need to be able to acknowledge that you're still a good ways off from this, a good ways. And so there needs to be a sense of urgency about this coaching staff. There's no doubt about that. I completely agree. Hunter Cheney, appreciate the $5 super chat. Good season with a bad ending. Hats off to Indiana. Once again, I'm glad you brought that up because Indiana and with the amount that their fans talked, a lot of people are going to look at this team and say, no, with the way that they acted all week and stuff. And then, of course, you got to kind of tuck tail and eat some crow like I'm having to do. A lot of people that would turn them off and say, no, I'm not pulling for Indiana. Not after. I don't want to give them their fan base after the way they behaved. No, they talked a lot as Alabama fans. We got to understand that when we were on top of the world, we was letting everybody know, and we ran our mouths too. But what always made me confident to do that was that you could always count on Alabama to back it up. 99 out of 100 times, the checks that you were writing, the team was cashing them. And they were making sure that you didn't look like a complete idiot in all the trash talking that Indiana did and saying they were going to boat race Alabama and everything else. Their team went out on the field and proved every single one of them right. That's the good stuff to me, man. I love that because that's like, I mean, I had respect for Indiana going in. I thought Alabama could beat Indiana, but I knew what Signetti was building, and I knew that he was doing things in a way it's like I think they can have some success. Now, he'll have his own obstacles in the offseason, replacing guys, and you've brought in a lot of transfer portal players from James Madison. There will be things that he has to overcome, and maybe because they are so good, maybe coordinators start getting attention, and you lose some coaching staff members, and there's some staff turnover. That's something that Signetti has not had to deal with. He will have obstacles, but this is the type of process and way to go that people go about it that I have tremendous amount of respect for. And I do want to give Indiana their flowers because while that was one of the most miserable things I've ever watched from an Alabama fan's perspective, I also there have been very few times that I've watched a team play Alabama and had more respect than I have for Indiana in this moment coming out of this game. I mean, that's they're confident. They know who they are. They play complementary football. They're complete. They're balanced. Just a very impressive performance. Hey, I need to get some water. This is hour long, and I'm already running out of gas, I guess. Appreciate everybody for bearing with me. All right, let's see if we can continue on here. Let's see. Crimson AL, appreciate the $5 super chat. Think we can get Sam Pittman for offensive line coach. Look, I think if you do decide to go in a different direction, which I don't think is a guarantee, but I do think it's a possibility, Sam Pittman and Scott Huff are the first two calls I'm making. Scott Huff, I believe he's with the Los Angeles Rams. Now, granted, he's the tight ends coach, I believe, and their tight ends are doing pretty well. I mean, Kobe Parkinson has been playing well. Terrence Ferguson, their second-round draft pick, he's kind of come on, hadn't made, second-round impact, but they got some good players. They really do. Tyler Higbee. So I believe he is the tight ends coach, if I'm not mistaken. Hopefully I'm not wrong on that. But I think that you've seen it with him. He's familiar with DeBoer. He's familiar with how things operate. It would be a pretty easy transition, and I think you would get an impact from him. I really do. But I think Sam Pittman, first of all, great for recruiting. I think you would get along with DeBoer extremely well. Sometimes people will say, oh, bring in this guy. If someone would have said, Bobby Petrino or something, hey, you need to let go of Ryan Grubb and bring in Bobby Petrino. I'd have been like, those Kalen DeBoer and Bobby Petrino, those personalities aren't meshing at all. It wouldn't work. It's not going to happen. Sam Pittman is one of those big name guys who I do feel like would fit this coaching staff. And I feel like you would fit in extremely well. So those would be the first two calls I made for sure. No doubt about it. Mattress Matt, appreciate the $5 super chat. And I know me and you go at it sometimes. You do it through words. I do or through typing, and I go back at you with, by talking or whatever. I have respect for you. I mean, you have a standard. You have a way that you view it. I want to start there and say, don't ever change, just because I have a different opinion, and that's completely fine. But you're always here. You're always sharing your opinions. I respect that. So I want to start there. But you said replace these coaches, offensive line strength, offense coordinator strength, offensive line, running back. I'm okay with losing, but Bama can never be the weaker team strength-wise. That can never happen again. I don't think it's a strength thing. I think if you got these two teams in a weight room, Alabama would beat them up and down the weight room when it came to strength. I think they got a lot of really big, strong guys. I think Indiana is more disciplined. I think from a technical standpoint, they are much more advanced. Their offensive line sustains blocks. Their running backs have a good feel for holes. There were times where Alabama defenders were closing, and it looked like they were going to be able to get them for maybe a yard gain or maybe a tackle for loss, and then somehow just the running back was able to somehow get the corner and then end up getting 5, 6, 7 yards, and they lived in second manageables or third manageables. Early on, Alabama was aggressive. They, I think, threw Indiana for a loop, and Signetti I think he looked at it and said, well, we can run the football. That's one thing. That's the difference between the two teams. When they threw a lot at Indiana early and did some things to break tendency, Indiana looked at that and said, okay, while we try to figure this out, we know we can turn to our run game and we could pick up positive yardage and get some things going, get some first downs, put ourselves in some favorable situations. Very hard to be super aggressive and bring a lot of pressure when it's 3rd and 2 or it's 3rd and 3 or it's 2nd and 4 because they can run the football. And so the fact that they could turn to that and they could find comfort in that while they figured out the passing game and what Alabama was doing, talk about it, they were able to overcome that. Alabama, when Ty's confused, what are you going to do? Sure, go out there and try to figure it out, run it a couple times, but you're just going to put Ty in a 3rd and line or a 3rd and 10 or 3rd and 8, and then you're trying to dig out of it, and everything they're doing from a 3rd down pressure standpoint, you're finding yourself in those situations constantly, and it can snowball on you very quickly. So, I don't know. I just got off on a tangent there. I don't think it's a strength problem, but the strength and conditioning coach needs to have an edge about him, and he needs to help these. It's not his job exclusively, but he needs to help get these guys more mentally tough. And I know that I'm not trying to take a shot. I'm just saying that there's there's a mental edge here and it's pretty apparent. The Indiana guys, and it might be just through better execution, but they have just a confidence and an aura about them that Alabama just simply doesn't have. And that's once again concerning. Sandy Flamingo, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Me, Lexi, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Outcoached and outplayed. Felt like Indiana took our soul today and embarrassing into the season. We need massive personnel changes this offseason. It was embarrassing, as embarrassing gets. It did feel like Indiana took Alabama's soul. And this is what they relished. Their fan base did. I'm sure the team to some extent did. I don't know if they specifically spelled it out like the fan base did, but they were excited about being the ones to put the nail in the Alabama coffin. They were really excited about it. And it certainly feels that way, doesn't it? I still think Alabama is one of the best programs in the country. I still think they got the potential to compete for national championships, and they can still get right. What we have to accept is this isn't Nick Saban's Alabama, and everybody knows that. But what I mean is you have no mental edge over anybody. You can have more talent on paper than anybody, than most anybody. That means very little when it comes to execution. They need to get back. They need to get back to having an edge. You know, they need to go back to one thing I'll give Kirby Smart credit for, and I think to an extent, I do know Nick Saban always had this way about him as well, was they always were the hunter. Maybe not later in the Nick Saban era, but Kirby, even after they won the national championship in 2021, I remember being at SEC Media Days in 22, and he straight up said, we are not going to be hunted. We are not. We refuse. We're not going to let that happen. We're going to be the ones who hunt. We don't care if there's a target on our back. And you saw that. They won back-to-back national championships, and he kept that team motivated and humbled. You know, Alabama needs – first of all, you will continue to be hunted for a very long time because of the Alabama A. That is the one element of this that is not going away anytime soon. If it's 15 years down the road and you've been a doormat program, maybe people would stop caring if they beat Alabama or not. But for a very long time, you can make your season and make everybody proud, your whole fan base proud by getting a win over Alabama. So they will remain in that position, but you've got to learn to play with a chip on your own shoulder. I thought that with all the disrespect that Alabama had going into this game, that they were going to play that way in this game. And I think they wanted to. That's the concerning part, is that I just think that Indiana was that much better. I really do. That's tough to say. But they gotta go back on the hunt, and they got to get that edge back about them. Stop feeling entitled. Stop feeling like, hey, we're Alabama. Oh, stop talking about the standard. And the reason I say stop talking about it, do it. You know, there's this attempt to hang on to the past and say we're Alabama. We have this standard. And people it causes them to talk about the standard a lot, but there's not as much action behind it. It's like, just go do the work. Just go do the work. Rest of it will take care of itself. Gary, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Michigan dodged a bullet. Kalen would have been Rich Rod 2.0. Bama deserved better. This ain't Bama football. I think if you were to ask Michigan right now, I still think they would take Kalen DeBoer, and they would be thrilled about it. I know that this seems really dark right now. I get it. I feel that to an extent. But I do feel like Michigan would be very happy with Kalen DeBoer. I feel like Penn State would have been thrilled with Kalen DeBoer. And I think Alabama is fortunate to have Kalen DeBoer still. But that only lasts so long. There are problems, and you've got to fix those problems. And so I still believe in his ability to do that. I'm not anywhere close to being ready to give up on that. But there needs to be some changes. There needs to be some very apparent changes. Philip Daniels, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Not one Bama fan would have been happy if we hired Signetti from just signing with Indiana when Saban retired, but boy, do we let one get away. I mean, first of all, I agree with you that I don't even know. I don't even know if after last year, if something would have happened with DeBoer and they went and got Signetti, I feel like a bunch of Alabama fans would have not been happy with that hire. They would have felt like it was a splash thing. He went about it in a way that I don't agree with his entire process. I don't agree with trying to run from competition. And I feel like they're still doing something. They're trying to make it as easy on themselves as possible. But what is wild is that he talks about practice and he really doesn't put a whole lot on the players. He's trying to figure out the way to best navigate and create the easiest path for his program. And all that would be like, man, if you were to tell me those things about a coach, I don't feel like that would translate. It is very much translating. It is very, very, very much translating. And that's still confusing to me to an extent. But what I saw from them today, and you've seen it all season. Once again, I said this at the beginning of the show. I didn't feel like it would translate against Alabama, but he has shown this all season. And he's a hell of a coach. And he's older. This isn't going to last super long for Indiana. I mean, first of all, I don't know that maybe he does stick around at Indiana for a very long time. Maybe he does. Maybe he doesn't. But either way, I don't think they're going to have him for maybe a decade. He's in his 60s, but he's got that it factor. There's no doubt. I mean, I don't know. Brandon from DC, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. One positive note, Ryan Williams set himself up right with his play today. One of the bright spots today for a kid with a bright future. Brandon, thank you so much. Thank you so much for bringing that up. Obviously, this show is going to have a lot of negativity. It's supposed to, I think. But you're 100% right. Give credit where it's due. He went out there and he took some shots. He caught with his hands. He made some difficult catches. What did he finish with? 6 catches for 53 yards on 7 targets. That's nothing to write home about. But, I mean, the entire offense threw for 170 yards, so he was responsible for almost a third of that. I was very proud of him. And I loved his answers when he was asked in the player press conferences and stuff in the game, leading up to the game. When he was asked about his struggles, he owned it. He didn't shy away from it, but he acknowledged it, but he also, you can tell that it wasn't like affecting him. Like he wasn't he was owning it. I had a lot of respect for it. And then he went out there today and he put up a strong performance. And I give him a lot of credit for that, man. That was very cool to see. So I appreciate you bringing that up. John, appreciate the $1.99 super chat. Grubb showed again why he lasted 1 season in the NFL. Once again, I don't know how much of it is that he's handcuffed with some of this. I don't feel like he did enough this season to overcome some of the deficiencies. Maybe he's one of those coordinators where when he's got the right pieces and he's confident in what he likes to call and all those things, he is one of the absolute best in the business. But as far as when he doesn't have certain things available, he doesn't know how to compensate for the fact he didn't know how to tweak things and change things up. Like, I think that is entirely possible. If that is the case, you have one of two choices. If you want to have success, you change coordinators, which I do not agree with right now. I don't. Or you make sure he's got what he needs to be successful and to make him one of those best play callers. Now, granted, some people would say, oh, well, you give anybody, a ton of talent and everything at their disposal. I'm saying that the fact that there was 0 run game and I don't care what you say about him, he's always had the threat of a run game to play off of as a coordinator. And he really wanted to lean into the passing game, and opposing defenses knew that they were going to throw the football a lot. But they always had to respect, at least to some extent, his run game. And this year, inability to sustain blocks at multiple positions, running backs not always seeing it. You had injuries, including with quarterback that kind of, just no one respected Alabama's run game much this year. They just didn't. And I don't think that he knew what to do with that. I think he tried to fix it as much as he could because he understood, hey, if I can get this going, man, it's going to open up a lot for me. And so while some of that falls on his own shoulders, and I'm not going to excuse that for him, I also don't know what, we just got to wait and see. Once again, I will say not everybody is going to agree with everything I say on here. It's my opinion. I'm telling you how I feel, and there's some frustration, and it feels like I'm probably making excuses for people. I just, if you could tell me, hey, you could get rid of Ryan Grubb and bring in Steve Sarkisian as the offense coordinator tomorrow, and it's like, man, I'll take that trade. Yeah, that'd be great. But I still think Ryan Grubb's one of the better offensive minds in college football, and he can do some good things, but they got a lot to work on. Cody Stevens, appreciate the $5 super chat. I know the defense allowed 38 points, but the amount of times the offense has put the defense in bad situations is unreal. Can't argue there. Now, granted, defense gets a 3-and-out to start the game. Offense goes out there and gets a couple of first downs, starts moving the football a little bit, and then pins Indiana deep, and Indiana ran it right down Alabama's throat. Or, I don't mean only running the football and stuff, but they had their way with Alabama's defense early. It wasn't that the offense put them in a really bad situation and they give up a touchdown. It's that they went on a long, sustained drive, 10-plus plays, 7 or 8 minutes off the clock. That's Alabama's defense's fault for being on the field for that long. But yes, overall, I agree with you, and I do feel like that the offense constantly put the defense in bad situations. But today was a combination of them being put in some poor situations. The offense couldn't sustain anything. They couldn't, barely over 25 minutes as far as the time of possession, but the defense did enough to hurt itself today that I can't say that it's the offense's fault alone, but that's a fair point. Thundar Barbar, appreciate the $9.99 super chat. ATM tackling on D. I don't know what that means. There's probably means something that it's not clicking. Way too much room on receivers. DBs got beat all day by receivers. We looked like we were afraid to hit. Might league tackling. I think a lot of it is Indiana was running the football pretty much at will. They were having consistent success. And actually, Black ended up having 99 yards on 15 carries. He averaged 6.6 yards per carry. Hemby had 89 yards and a touchdown on 18 carries. He averaged 4.9 yards per carry. Fernando Mendoza was really, creating a lot. Like, they did have a couple of design quarterback runs, but it was more so things breaking down, and he's slippery, man, and good vision. And just, man, there were so many times where it thought Alabama had him dead to rights, and he would make something happen, and all of a sudden he's squeezing out of a hole and he's getting a first down. And that is killer for a defense. That is so deflating. But I feel like the corners were probably in a position where, they had to go play big boy football today because there was so much that was needing to be committed to the run game, and they were playing off of that extremely well. Indiana did exactly what they wanted to do offensively. Like, the game plan going in, they stayed balanced. They had the early down success. They played off of it. They just, everything that we said about Indiana's offense and how it likes to operate, they did that, and they made it look easy. It was wild. Willie J. Smith, appreciate the $5 super chat. What does Ty's future look like? I don't know. I really don't. I could see them running it back with him. I could see him still entering the NFL draft. Maybe it's a situation like Jalen Milroe where I once again, I've said this before, but I still don't think Jalen necessarily like was itching to go to the NFL. I feel like if Alabama would have, embraced him, but I think that they kind of thought maybe he was trending in that direction and they kind of had his money allotted elsewhere. And that's kind of what was told to him. So he had a decision: go to the NFL, try to make that work now, maybe transfer, but it would be another system, new teammates, new environment. So I think he ultimately chose to go to the NFL. Did Alabama do the same thing this time around? Like, is the money available to bring Tai Simpson back? Or the fact that they signed 2 quarterbacks in this recruiting cycle, and the fact that Keelan Russell, I'm sure, is commanding a pretty penny, a respectable penny. And, who knows with Austin Mack, maybe it's not available. Maybe the funds aren't available to bring him back. So maybe he has to transfer, or maybe he has to go on to the NFL draft, despite the fact that he might want to stick around, or probably needs to stick around for another year. Or maybe he's back. I have no idea. That's going to be a massive talking point because so much is going to be dictated based off of what happens with Tai. Last year, it very much felt like Jalen Milroe's time at Alabama was going to be coming to a close, and he had multiple years as a starter. So while I do think he could have benefited a little bit from coming back, or at least staying in college for another year, he had gotten 2 seasons worth of starting experience. He kind of was what he was, in some ways. I wish I could had more. We're going to be focusing a lot on that, though. That's going to be a huge talking point for us. And as soon as we get word on what that's going to look like, everything else will probably start taking shape. But we're kind of in a wait and see, not with the entire roster, but that's a big, big, big storyline this offseason. Is what does that look like? And to be honest, I'm fine either way. If they run it back with him, I get it, because I still don't think he was 100%. I still think he's got tremendous NFL talent. I think they can win with this guy. But if they, if he ends up moving on to the NFL, I support that. I'm totally fine moving on, seeing what else is there. It's whatever they want to do. I really don't have a lean one way or another, I guess is the way I'll put it. John, appreciate the $1.99 super chat. Offensive line is too fat and slow. As a chunky guy, I'm not going to sit up here and talk about people being fat and slow, but they're a bigger group. It's unfortunate that Caden Proctor was not healthy throughout the offseason. I would have loved to have seen him be available in the spring. And I'm from what we had heard, I mean, he was 365 plus pounds. And I think probably around right now, he's probably somewhere between 350 and 360, anywhere in between there, probably closer to like 355, 356. But he did work to try to get some of that weight off. But if he could have been healthy and available all throughout the offseason, they could have really worked with him, got him down to, 340, maybe a little under that. I think it was with his frame and stuff. Everybody that says, hey, get him down to 325, 330, it ain't happening. JC Latham ain't happening either. You can get those guys down to a certain, 340, would be like 335 maybe. But just any further than that, I don't know. But and I'm sure when he shows up, if he leaves for the NFL draft, if he shows up to the combine, I'm guessing he's going to be a lot lighter. He's going to work his tail off, and it's going to look really good. And I just, that would make me question, boy, but what would it have looked like if you could have been there? But he was hurt. I mean, you can't really blame him for that. But you can't say Parker Brailsford was fat and slow. Cam Dewberry was bigger, and he's not the most nimble guy. But Geno Vandermark's not super big. He's a technician. He's not super athletic. Jaden Roberts, we didn't see a ton of him. Woken Formby is not, maybe he's a little clunky mover a little bit, not the most nimble guy himself, but he's not fat. Michael Carroll's not fat. I think, the only really, really bigger guy is probably Caden Proctor, and that's just who he's always been. But it's certainly, the offensive line wasn't where it needed to be this year. I mean, that's where we can agree. Donnie Chappelle, appreciate the $9.99 super chat. Do you think it's too much to ask for DeBoer to get fired on the tarmac? Yes, I do. Yes, I do, because who you going to get? Who you going to get? And I mean, I think anybody out there that's even remotely realistic, I'm taking DeBoer over him. I really am. Like, and I understand when you get beat down this bad, and you got beat down this bad against Georgia in the SEC championship, like, 2 of the last 3 games that Alabama's played in, they've been destroyed, and they were getting destroyed by Oklahoma. Like, people's patience is running thin. But I think at this point, I just don't know. I'm still a big Brent Key fan. I understand they blew that game the other night, but I like what he's doing. I think he's got a little bit of grittiness and toughness, and that's one where if something ever did happen with Kalen DeBoer, that would be one of the guys that I would probably want Alabama to go after. Everybody's going to swing for the fences, and that's fine. I mean, the guys that it's like, oh, this is someone that I think they would need to look at. But I don't think Alabama's giving up on Kalen DeBoer. I have thought it was interesting that he hadn't signed a contract extension or anything like that. Like maybe based off of this result, maybe he doesn't. I don't know. I have no idea what's going on with that, but it has been kind of strange. Brandon from DC, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. If I'm DeBoer, I'm going to coach John Gruden and having him come in to analyze our offense, fix the run schemes, and have the guys work it all spring. If you could get him to do it, I think anybody right now that can put an eye on things and try to help get things fixed, I think it would help. I don't think it's a scheme problem with the run stuff. I think, and I say that sometimes the fits schematically weren't always there. I think you could probably have players that better fit your system kind of more across the board. That would help. It was just guys' inability to sustain blocks. Like, I don't care if guys can't do that. I don't care what you call. It ain't going to work. Guys got to get guys blocked. And running backs got to see it when it's there. And you've got to have some sort of threat. Like, they didn't have enough of a vertical presence in the passing game that there was just so many elements that fell short this year. But I think from a coaching standpoint, it's not really the scheme. It's more of how do you get guys to execute what you're calling? That's where we got to be where it starts. And that's been the biggest frustration for me. I don't know. Alabama Roll Tide, appreciate the $1.99 super chat. Coach Cap got to go. Starts with the offensive line, slow, soft. What I will say is Indiana's offensive line is not very big. They're not very big. I think average, maybe a little over 6'4", 6'4.5", something like that, maybe like 311 pounds. That's not huge. But they get after you, and they play as a unit. So, I'm sitting there seeing that, and, okay, it's possible. Why aren't you getting that? Where are you falling short that's causing – why can't you have that? Because that's not up – maybe not even to that extent, but someone's got to explain to me, I would love for somebody to explain to me why it has looked the way that it has looked. It is baffling to me. It should never – I've said this multiple times this show. It should never look how it's looked this season. And so the fact that it has – I mean, I don't know. Donald Andrews, appreciate the $5 super chat. The SEC in general has become full of divas focused on getting paid more than championships, while Indiana has 3 stars kicking 5-star tail. Bama issue 2. I'm glad you brought that up because I think to an extent you were very right. And I talked about this on Twitter. This is a whole different debate, whole different topic. I don't want to necessarily dive down this rabbit hole right now, but the whole debate of I think that that Alabama fans or other SEC fan bases should be more so pulling for other SEC teams. I'm not telling Alabama fans to be Auburn fans. I'm not telling them to be LSU fans or Tennessee fans. There's going to be certain rivalries where it's there's a hate. I'm not asking Mississippi State fans to go pull for Ole Miss, but I'm saying overall, it benefits Alabama when the SEC is good, when you're able to get the benefit of the doubt, because in this debate this year, and it has been, Alabama has put themselves in this position a lot where the brand and the debate, one thing you could always count out from Alabama, it's one of the reasons I think they, it helped them get in over Florida State, even though Florida State was undefeated, was that it's man, Florida State could get in this thing without its quarterback and get its tail whipped, embarrassed, and make you look stupid as a committee. Nick Saban's Alabama is not going to make you look dumb. They might not win the game necessarily. Maybe they come up short, but they're not going to get it run off the field and make you look stupid as a committee. Like these are things that always has benefited Alabama. And it's also benefited SEC teams because you're viewed as the strongest conference. Well, in the short term, people think that's not, Bama's always going to be viewed as Alabama. They're always going to get the benefit of the doubt. Doesn't matter what happens with the rest of the SEC. Doesn't matter. And they also have said the SEC, it's the best conference. Everybody accepts it as the best conference. They'll never have that problem either. My point is I'm not looking at this in 2025 or 2026. I'm looking at this 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road. And at the time that I was having this conversation with people, Ohio State had not been beat yet. So I'm sitting there thinking, the Big Ten has just won back-to-back national championships. The recruiting has Alabama fallen by the wayside in the recruiting front? Absolutely not. That's why they're going to continue to be very competitive. But you've got other teams that are spending and swinging for the fences and getting expensive guys in. It's creating more parity. The last two national champions have been Big Ten teams, and the current number 1 and number 2 teams in this tournament are Big Ten teams. So if they go 3 in a row, how many does it take before fans start to realize this whole idea that it's the SEC, that's eventually going to end if this continues? So I was saying you need to have some conference pride. I started looking at it and thinking about it because the bowl season has kind of thrown me off. I still think other programs, other teams, to some extent, they take pride in playing football games. I'm not convinced that I think across the board, most of the SEC, they don't care about bowl games whatsoever because of the standard and it being the SEC, it's the best of the best. There's standards kind of across the board. And no one, if it doesn't matter if you're Vanderbilt and you go to a good bowl game and you get a win, if you're not in the playoffs, you're still, that's great. You still can't get in the playoffs though. And that's what matters to everybody now. I feel like because of the SEC's success, mostly because of Alabama for so long, we've reached a point where I think there are some divas in the SEC. And I think there's this perception of we're just better than everybody else. And it's like, you can only take away so much from these bowl games, but there is zero pride. That's one thing that we can all say. There's nobody over here. The results are the results. And you're just not seeing it right now. Indiana, you're right. They don't have to have as much talent, as much star power as you, because they play with a chip on their shoulder. They play together. They play disciplined football. They're well coached. They have a belief in each other, and it's not a bunch of guys making a lot of money. So I just went on a rant. Maybe it was the wrong time for that, but I once again, I'm not saying, hey, go pull for Auburn or your biggest rivals, but I'm going to pull for the SEC because I understand maybe not in people's arguments. It's fair. I'm definitely pulling for them in the regular season. And the SEC did well in the regular season. So I still think that's something that they have to hang their hats on. And we still don't know what to expect in these bowls. There's only so much you can take away from it. But at the same time, anytime the SEC is going against somebody else right now, I don't think people realize that there's a war going on for superiority because everybody just assumes the SEC is not going anywhere. Doesn't matter what the Big Ten does. They're never dethroning the SEC. I'm here to tell you, I don't believe that. So the results, you got to continue to have, as long as you're continuing to produce, if the SEC ends up having a national champion this year and the Big Ten went back to back, but and now it's back in the SEC, like that's fine with me. But that's why I'll be pulling for SEC teams moving forward. I don't want to pull for Georgia, to be honest with you. I really don't. Or Ole Miss potentially. I have no idea how that game's going. But when it comes to superiority and where things are trending, and I would just much rather it stay in the SEC or get back in the SEC at this point. And that way we can maintain, and then Alabama's got to figure out a way to get back to being that team that the entire rest of the SEC relies on to take care of them. Jonesy, appreciate the $9.99 super chat. I won't call the season a failure. The team improved in a lot of ways, mostly mental. The focus in the offseason needs to be reestablishing the physicality along the offensive line, but became way too one-dimensional. Once again, I think you always bring level-headedness as far as your comments. I agree with that. I think you raise a good point with the mostly mental. Like I'm sitting there arguing against the mental toughness or the mental side of things. But I will say, to your point, they have made improvement. they battled back. I don't think the team last year against Oklahoma, I don't think they rallied from 17 points down. I really don't. They found themselves, when they blew a 17-point lead against Auburn. I don't know if last year's team is hanging on and figuring out a way to continue to fight and claw in that environment and figuring out a way to get a win. So I think in some ways they did take steps in the right direction, but they still have some work to do on that front. I do fully believe that, but that's a good comment. I appreciate that. Appreciate you as always, brother. Beverly Smith, appreciate the 199 super chat. Low ball and goalish, appreciate the 499 super chat. First step, fire Coach Cap, then address the coaching malpractice of this game and the second UGA game. No reason Bama fans should travel to California and lose by 30. Once again, man, 35 too. 35, 5 touchdowns. That's a long time. That's a long time since that's happened. And outside of a 34-7 run, let's do the math here. So outside of that 34-7 run after they got down 17-0, that's 17. Georgia, 28, 45. So 45-14. And then this game, you're looking at like 80. If you take away that 34-7 run, those 3 quarters against Oklahoma, they were outscored like 80-something to 17 in the last 3 games. That's wild. And if you just want to say give them credit for Oklahoma, but in the 2 game, the SEC championship, and then against this one, when you actually were playing the elite of the elite, you got beat a combined 56, or is it 66-10. Wow, that's rough, brother. That is rough. Rough. I'm just going through the emotions, guys. Like I'm figuring this out myself. I hope you guys don't mind. Appreciate it. I don't even know. All right. Speed RTR 499. Appreciate the 499 super chat. Clint, effort goes far further than just in-game. Our lack of execution damns our off-field prep. 4 blowouts in 2 years with our talent is baffling. Once again, that's a fair point. I mean that when I was talking about the effort, when I saw that against Florida State, it felt like that. I don't know. It's just different when you see it. When you see it on the field, not that they had given up on Kalen DeBoer, but just they were so okay with what was happening in that football game. This one, I didn't feel like they were necessarily okay with it. I just think that Indiana said, you're going to take it and you're going to like it. They forced it. And Alabama wanted no part of it. They tried to fight against it, and that brings its own concerns. But you make a good point that the effort does. The fact that there hasn't been, I'm sure everybody has tried really hard to get some of these issues fixed. I don't think anybody's just sitting back and saying, nah, we're good. We can't run the football, but we're fine with that. I think everybody's done everything that they think that they possibly could, but there's also we're not going to accept this. Because there's something there that goes beyond. If I don't want UAB catching a stray, but just go with me here. If UAB couldn't run the football, I think part of that's just like, man, I don't know what to tell you. Keep trying, of course, but there's so many deficiencies with the roster talent and stuff that, sometimes there's just nothing you can do. Alabama had too much talent for it to look as bad as it looked this year. So the fact that they didn't ever get any better at it is, if you want to say that there's some effort problems there, I can't necessarily push back against that too much. Perry, appreciate the $5 super chat. I do question why wait to pull Tai, though we'll see about his health. Should have been an auto pull. You keep him in down 17-0, and he couldn't throw the ball. Yeah. And once again, I understand that he's been the guy, the locker room loves him. They want him to do well. Isaiah Horton's there because of him. So you that type of guy. A lot of people feel like they should have went away from Jalen Milroe at points last year, but the locker room wanted him and they loved him. And so I get that in both situations, it's hard, but if the guy was to a point where you had to pull him because he couldn't go, he couldn't go after it happened. He wasn't there. He couldn't execute. And when you were still within striking distance, someone should have had enough about him to step up and say, look, man, you can't do it. You can't give what we need. We love you. You know, this has nothing to do with you, because you had to do that anyways. You reached that point. But the problem is, by that point, it was pretty much all she wrote. And then you start moving the football. You ended up having to settle for a field goal. But if you'd have done that earlier, I don't know. But once again, once they got multiple scores up, with the way that Alabama could not stop them defensively, and they were having their way with Alabama's defense, it really 17-0, it was over. It really was, because you weren't ever going to get the stops that you needed. Even in those situations where you would get a positive play, you'd send the right pressure, put them in a negative situation, they would just come right back and they would overcome it. So I agree to an extent, but I don't think it would have made a difference either way. But yes, they probably did need to pull Tai a lot sooner. Perry, appreciate the $2 super chat. Also didn't understand the Riley usage. I was kind of surprised by that. Maybe they thought with his explosiveness as a runner that maybe he could do some things. I don't know, but I can't. Am I going to get upset at them for using Kevin Riley when Daniel Hill had 5 carries for 13 yards? Jam Miller didn't. Yeah, I mean, I knew. So Jam didn't play at all, right? No, Jam played. He didn't have a carry. I don't know how I missed that. Look, once again, wow, that's I don't know. I need to go. I'm confused by everything now. That's weird. Then no one else was having success, is my point. That's wild. I don't know how I missed that. I'm like 90% sure he played, right? I mean, I wasn't seeing 28 thinking it was 26. The whole game on my head spinning. I don't know. Andy Stoker, appreciate the $10 super chat. Byrne needs to force DeBoer to make changes ASAP. If he doesn't, then DeBoer needs to be let go. No. I mean, and you say make major changes. Greg Byrne hired Kalen DeBoer to do a job. It didn't look the way it was supposed to last year. And I understand Ryan Grubb was let go from Seattle. That cleared a path. That probably made it a little easier. But DeBoer had the tough conversation with Nick Sheridan. He did. And he said, hey, I don't think he did a terrible job last year, but we have an opportunity to get Ryan back in here. We know he's capable of. We feel like he can help this team, help this coaching staff. And Nick Sheridan, from now until the end of time, I will always respect what he did as far as being willing to take that step back. He didn't run. He knew what the narratives were going to be. A lot of fans wanted him fired anyways, so you knew fans were probably going to be celebrating the fact that you weren't calling plays anymore, but he ate all of it, and he stayed on staff, and I give him credit for that. But that's like a tough conversation that Kalen DeBoer was willing to make. So I trust that if he feels like that going after a different position coach at certain spots would help the team, I trust that he's going to do that and have those tough conversations and do what's best, because some coaches, their downfall is their inability or unwillingness to make some of those changes because they're surrounded by friends and they want people to do, they don't want to let a friend down or whatever, but it ends up being their own downfall. I don't think Kalen DeBoer is going to do that. I really don't. But I also don't think Greg Byrne needs to be stepping in right now this early and saying, hey, you make all these changes. You're no longer making the calls. You do what I want you to do. You're gone. I don't think that's healthy. I don't think that creates the right relationship. So let DeBoer go through his process. And then if we get into next season and let's say he didn't make some coaching changes and a lot of this still looks the same, a lot of fans want it to be fixed. So you're going to be frustrated that you got to live through that. But by that point, it's like if DeBoer wasn't willing to make the changes they needed to and it's caused the same issues to happen, it's now DeBoer and his neck is on the line. 2 for life. Appreciate the $4.99 super chat. We need AJ McCarron leading this team. What do you mean by that? Like an AJ McCarron type of presence at quarterback, Or are you saying that AJ McCarron needs to be the head coach at Alabama? Because I actually have, hope for AJ. I think he's got a good mind, a good offensive mind, and I do think that he's kind of got a personality where I could see him being a good coach. He has zero experience, zero. And so that's something that is just unknown. But if you're at a place like Alabama, yeah, you got no business doing that. But I got respect for AJ, and I hope that he does well with the Birmingham Stallions, and maybe he can work his way into some sort of, just the more experience he gets. Maybe I do think he's got head coaching material, or a head coach's makeup. But I don't think he should be leading this team right now. Maybe he meant as a quarterback, though, like that type of presence. I don't fully know what you meant by that. Apologies. CT Ox, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Kickback MIA, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Biggest bowl game loss in Alabama football history. Previously 38-6 Orange Bowl loss to Nebraska in 1972. Congrats, DeBoer and company. That's tough to read. Kickback. That's tough to read. I didn't know that. That's tough. Because once again, I can't look at this and say, oh, this happened. This was kind of fluky. Once again, getting beat down by Georgia in the SEC championship, it's ugly. It's embarrassing. It could have easily been 28-0, but some of that beat down was through, punt blocks, and this was just Indiana being that much better. So this is one, once again, I got to continue to eat humble pie, and will continue, because I didn't see any. I knew that there was the possibility that Indiana could be a better football team than Alabama. But I thought that if even at both of these teams at their best, and I get maybe Alabama didn't play its best, but I thought that you put both teams at their absolute best, worst case, Alabama loses a close one, because I thought that the gap was not that big. If Alabama played poorly, very poorly, and Indiana played great, I still would have thought like 14 points, 35 is different than anything I could have thought. And just, we weren't hyping it up anything close to this. So big swing and a miss on my part, huge swing and a miss. And I'm going to be eating that crow. I started this year eating crow, and I ended eating crow. That is what we do here. It is what it is. Got to take the bad with the good. Tony T, appreciate the $5 super chat. Clint DeBoer reminds me a lot of Mark Richt. I saw so many more talented Georgia teams not only lose, but lose ugly to more physical teams. I don't hate that. Mark Richt, he recruited well. Did he recruit at the level that Kirby Smart is? Not quite, but they were pulling in. It's Georgia. Was pulling in good recruiting classes. A lot of people had a ton of respect for Mark Richt. I think players loved playing for him. But I can certainly remember watching Georgia teams that would lose games. I don't know that I remember them getting beat. Maybe they have been, but maybe they were. But I do remember them being physically dominated a lot more times than just a few during his tenure. So that's not terrible. Hope that isn't the case for Kalen DeBoer. I also don't think that's an unfair comparison right now. That's also not the worst comparison in the world. Like Mike Shula and Mike DeBose, like those are, you don't want to be one of those guys. Mark Richt, while he wasn't the elite of the elite, he was a good coach and he had success, but he had shortcomings. And so that's not the biggest diss that you could throw Kalen DeBoer's way. Paulie Vans, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. CT Ox, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Ty's dad told The Athletic, an article online, he's had epidural shots in his back for months. Fatal flaw was a run game. Everything improves with good run game. So that has been confirmed by Todd's dad. And we've been hearing things similar. Still don't want to comment on it because I don't know I probably missed that article. I don't know. There's been so much going on, but that is what we had kind of been hearing. But not having a run game, like imagine you've got a quarterback that's not 100% healthy. He was already having some issues as far as the vertical passing game, but now, you can't really. One of the elements of his game that he kind of had relied on a lot throughout his career was his legs. And I thought all year a lot of that sitting back there was what they did with Michael Penix, where it's like, hey, you're our guy. Uh, we rely on you so much. We don't want you running a whole lot and going out there and getting hurt. But I thought, man, I get that. I understand that. But man, it's just such a huge element of his game. And you need to compensate for some of the deficiencies or shortcomings that you have elsewhere. You've got to lean into his legs. But if he's injured, and it's not just that you wouldn't want him doing that anyways, but also he's at a big time threat or like at risk of aggravating something worse or something getting worse or whatever. I more so would understand it, but now that's like something that you can't turn to that you could have been able to. You can't run the football. You can't sustain blocks, which is one of the reasons you can't run the football. Like, well, man, what a mess. And that's why I say some of this stuff, it's like, I don't know what to think of Ryan Grubb. I really don't. I'm not ready to give up on him, but man, and you got to put the shortcomings of the offense in a lot of ways, a lot of it on the coaching staff. But man, just so much wrong with this offense this year. I wasn't expecting it, guys. I mean, I just thought we were going to get tons of offensive success. And I thought defense was probably overall a little better than I was expecting, but I was expecting a strong defensive performance this year. And I thought with what Alabama's probably going to be able to do on offense and score points, I think you've got the perfect complementary defense that's going to be able to get some stops when you need it. Maybe not a ton, but can force turnovers. Like I just thought it was going to be a great complementary football, and just the offense falling short. Defense ended up kind of being what you thought it was going to be, maybe a little bit better, but that just threw everything for a loop. And considering all the limitations, I mean, winning 11 games is pretty crazy because they won 11 games without a run game. Like that's wild, but still, it's not the Bama standard. It didn't look like the Bama standard, and it's got to get fixed. It really does. Paulie Vans, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Is Tai Simpson gone, or was tonight too rough for him to be a good draft prospect? I've already addressed that. Maybe you weren't on earlier. Maybe you just posted this a long time ago, and it took me a while to get to the other one. I have no idea. I really don't. I could see him leaving. I could see him coming back. I could see even a situation possibly where he transfers. If the only way I think that happens is if Alabama has already allotted the NIL funds that maybe he was getting to someone else, because they were expecting, based off of where he was trending, they weren't expecting to have him back in 2026. I think that to some extent that was what happened with Milroe. I also think that there wasn't this huge push to get Milroe back, like they had already given it away. And I think with the lack of being a clear fit there between talent and scheme, I think they were quite okay with that. Don't know if that would be the case with Todd, but that would be the only way I would probably say that he transfers. If I had to guess right now, I could see him coming out. Because even if I still think it's possible that he goes first round, especially if it comes out that he was dealing with some injury issues and that was holding him back. Like NFL teams will probably look and say, okay, and there will be some concern about the lack of experience, but I could see an NFL team, maybe not even on day one, but day two, with Tyler Shuck type of range where, second round to the New Orleans Saints, put him in a quarterback competition, see if he wins it. If he's not ready, you sit him, maybe he ends up starting by the end of the year, whatever. That's something I could potentially see. But I could also see him coming back, by the way, fully. And if the coaching staff knows what he's been going through and knows what the tie that they had gotten for the last half of the season was not the tie that they had prior to, then they probably would be willing to go all in with him. But what would that sacrifice as far as elsewhere, and would that be worth it? That's a decision that the staff has to make. Ralph Bryant, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. The comparisons, Indiana looked prepared and other teams looked that way. We haven't lost old, prepared, and ready for games. It always looks scattered. It does. It takes them way too long to get anything going. And if the other team does what it needs to do, like a Georgia, like an Oklahoma, or excuse me, like an Indiana, then they put themselves in a situation where they never get anything going because they kind of not give up, but it's like, man, we're toast, and they find themselves in a really tough situation. But I was really hoping one of the things too, and I guess I haven't brought this up, that really made me realize that Alabama was probably in big trouble was you had watched all these other games where the team that had a first round bye had really struggled in the first quarter. Now, granted, if you look at the actual points that Indiana had, I want to say they either had 0 or 3 points in the first quarter. So that falls in line, but you saw them having quite a bit of success and they looked sharp. And so the time off was not affecting them to the same extent. It wasn't affecting them at all. And you had seen it pretty much in every other game where someone had a bye week in the first round. They had come out rusty, flat, a little bit off. And that's not going to last for 4 quarters, but you knew they were kind of in trouble. And one of the big things that I talked about all week was I think that Alabama's got to take advantage of that. I think you are going to see that from Indiana. I was wrong. And I thought during that time, it's not going to last forever. You need to jump out on them. They might have started feeling the pressure if you could have. I think they threw the kitchen sink at Fernando Mendoza early. I think they generated a lot of momentum for themselves. They had started to move the football. But how many times this year? And it's been the offense. Like the defense will go out there, they'll do something like they did, get a lot of momentum, make you feel really good in the offense. Sometimes it's going out there and going 3 and out. Sometimes it's getting a couple of first downs. We're like, okay, all right, they're starting to get something going. Man, if they can drive down the field and get some points here, maybe score a touchdown, we'll be in business. Because then the defense, if they go out there and do that again, then you get man, we're really cooking now. And then offense ends up stalling out for one reason or another, punts the football, and then the other team on the second drive, they end up doing something with it because that's happened way too many times this year. So I know it was a big goal for them to start fast in this game. They did defensively, they didn't offensively, and Indiana, they were able to get the ball back a second time without any sort of added pressure because the score's 0-0, and then they go on a long drive and put points on the board, and from that point say, okay, we've settled down, we're good to go. And so any advantage that you might have had, you didn't. That was unfortunate to see. Chad Raybon, appreciate the $5 super chat. Clint, do you think lack of separation from the wide receivers was an issue later in the year, or was Tai just not seeing the field as well? I don't think separation was an issue for Alabama. Maybe on certain, sometimes it did feel like, okay, Tai's hanging on to the football a little too long. Must be great coverage downfield. And this is what I hate about not being in the stadium because I don't know what's happening downfield until they show a replay. But then there were times where it's like Tai was just holding on the football too long because he was kind of confused. They kind of were, they were causing him some issues. And I do feel like he kind of gets a little timid when that happens. There might be a play or two here or there where everybody is covered, but consistently, no. I don't think there was any sort of issue with, wide receivers separating at all. But I do think that there's also times and moments, and I think that you kind of got they pointed in this direction or alluded to this a little bit in the press conferences leading up to the game. They were really excited that he kind of pulled the trigger, Tai Simpson did, and threw the ball up to Jeremy Bernard, even though Jeremy wasn't clearly open, and they let him go kind of win a 50-50 ball. And he had a great epic catch that helped them beat Oklahoma. I don't know if it was just Tai not having the trust in his guys to go do that, but sometimes even when it's not there, if a CD Morgan, I don't know who's going to be throwing him the football next year, but if he's on the field and he kind of establishes himself as that dude, he continues to do on the college level what he's done on the high school level. Sometimes you got to just throw that thing down the field to him and just let him go get it. And he's going to go get it for you. You didn't have to be open. But I didn't see any sort of consistent issues from a separation standpoint. I think last year there were some problems. I think the last couple of years there have been some problems. Last year, actually not as much, but especially towards the end of the Nick Saban era, Kobe Prentice and Kendrick Law and a lot of those guys I think were struggling a little bit. But I didn't notice that. Maybe someone else would disagree, which is fine. Joe Brandon, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. You don't want to be overly critical. Stop making excuses for DeBoer. He's a soft coach, and it shows up in the trenches. We needed to fire him. He's soft. They didn't, Joe. They didn't fire him. He's there. He's the coach. And granted, it's fine if you want to say all those things. You know, that's fine, because I think I think some of that stuff has been earned. But what I'm not going to do is go ahead and write off 2026 because of how 2025 ended. And, you know, I saw moves in the right direction. I saw way too many problems for me to feel super comfortable going into next season. And we'll address those problems throughout the offseason. We'll see how they address them. We'll say whether we agree with it or not. But, I mean, he's not getting fired. I don't think he's getting fired. I mean, maybe I'm wrong, but who are they going after? They're not going after. There's nobody at this point. I mean, you're acting like it's just that easy. It's really not. I don't know. I do think that he could be a little bit tougher at times. I do. But I think they're doing everything they can to fix it. I don't know. T. Smitty, appreciate the $5 super chat. I know we are upset, but DeBoer did a good job in taking this team as far as he did. How many coaches could have done the job DeBoer has this season? Apparently everybody but DeBoer, just about. DeBoer and Brian Harsin and Hugh Freeze. I mean, if it kind of feels that way when you're talking to Bama fans, that just anybody would have done, anybody that was following in Nick Saban's footsteps. You either had to be Nick Saban or you had to be a clone of Nick Saban for it. And I will say there were chinks in the armor before Nick Saban retired. So even, like, I guarantee you, if Nick Saban would have stayed on as the coach, I wouldn't guarantee this, but I don't know I don't know that Alabama wins the national championship in the last 2 years. And I think there would have been a larger portion of the fan base saying, I think it's time for Nick Saban to hang it up. Like, I just don't think that at this point, you know, fans weren't going to, based off of the success rate that they had, they would not have been happy with going half a decade without winning a national championship, 4 years without getting to a national championship, and some of the first round exits and stuff that we've seen, like, you know, obviously what you saw against Michigan, and they did come close. And granted, if they get past Michigan, I think it's possible in 2023 they beat Washington and they win the national title. Just how it works sometimes. But it was going to look different under anybody. Dan Lanning, Steve Sarkisian. Because I guarantee you, I could ask people right now, would you trade out Kalen DeBoer for Steve Sarkisian? And there would be a large percentage of people that would say yes. Texas just regressed. This was supposed to be their year. Quinn Ewers was supposed to be the guy that held everybody back because he was limited as a quarterback. And now you've got Arch Manning, the prodigy, and this was what they've been building towards. They've made the college football playoff, and they've gotten to the, you know, now it's their time. And they didn't even make the playoffs. Like, they regressed, and they looked terrible there for a while. We talk about Kalen DeBoer and Alabama's offense and Ryan Grubb. How awful did Texas's offense, their offensive line? We talk about Alabama's offensive line, and yet there's a bunch of people that right now would just forget all of that and completely, well, they would want Steve Sarkisian. And I'm not saying that Steve Sarkisian is not a great coach. I think that he is. I'm thinking that this is like a parity thing in college football, and it's just tougher right now. And even last year, like, yes, Georgia made the college football playoff, but they had extreme deficiencies, and that bit them when they played, Notre Dame in the college football playoff. They got waxed by Notre Dame. Wasn't this bad? Not even close. But like, even the Kirby Smarts of the world, to an extent, are dealing with this. And you're trying to follow in the footsteps of the greatest college football coach of all time. There's going to be transition. You're trying to do it your way, but there's this old way that you're also trying to respect. You've got guys that have done it a certain way. Like, you're trying to bridge that gap. And I just think it's a little bit tougher than even myself. Like, I didn't acknowledge how tough it was going to be. Doesn't mean that we can acknowledge that there aren't some red flags here, because there are, and I'm concerned about it. I mean, I'm going to be honest, but I don't think it's ready to, I'm not ready to pack the bags and pack his bags and send him packing. Like, I mean, it's tough. So, I mean, and granted, if this continues at a certain point, you have to, because it's Alabama. The standard is the standard. as according to the fans, and they're not going to put up with consistently looking like this. But I also think he's recruited well. I think he's going to continue. I think they'll fill some gaps in the transfer portal. Let's just see. Let's see how things continue. I'm not ready to give up on Kalen DeBoer just yet, even though I'm very frustrated with him and the staff. Whoa, Perry. That's appreciate the $2 super chat. Tai diagnosed with broken ribs. That is surprising. So based off of what he had previously, this was new. He took a shot. So that's unfortunate. I don't know how that affects him. I don't even know what the timeline is for coming back from broken ribs. From like if he decided to declare, I mean, I'm sure he'd be fine by the time the combine and all that stuff rolled around. I don't know. We'll see. That's interesting, though. I appreciate you bringing that up. I didn't know that it was broken ribs. Chasen Smith, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Look, man, the whole problem on the offense was the offensive line. It was crap all year. Tai carried them farther than I thought we could go. DC needs to go. DC is in Kane Womack? I don't know why you would say that. I mean, giving up 38 points ain't great. That's pretty brutal, but we've been pretty team Kane for a minute. I'm not going to overreact to one performance, and I don't know. That's I think in some ways Todd did the best that he could, because I think there were, just think about it across the board. Wide receivers, you had drop problems at wide receiver, so that position was not above things that helped you get beat or helped you be limited on offense. But you had drop problems at receiver. You had an offensive line that couldn't sustain blocks, that struggled with edge speed, that really struggled with speed in general. You had young tight ends. You had an experienced tight end that was a good blocker, but not an elite blocker, not what you had last year. You had young guys behind him because your tight end 2 ends up getting banged up. And they just struggled to, they played like freshmen. It's understandable. Still got a lot of belief in them. But you got a quarterback that ends up getting banged up that already has some, or at least had been limited as far as the vertical passing game. You have running backs that are constantly getting banged up, and they're not always seeing the hole correctly. And, it's just like, man, at every single position, you have issues. When that is where it's like that can't happen long. That can't happen long, because that means it's a coaching problem when you're consistently having every single offensive position have its issues that's contributing to you losing games or not being able to win football games. But that's a lot, man. That's a lot. And I don't even know what to make of it. But the DC, I mean, I like Kane. I think he did a good job this year overall. And I think they're going to continue to work to get better. I really do. Let's see. Okay. Greg Young, appreciate the $9.99 super chat. Hope you're doing well. Hope your family's doing well. What are the real issues on the offensive line? Scheme, technique, numbers. It's got to be coaching, right? I think that coaching plays a part. I really do. But if everybody but one guy doesn't do his job on a given play, more than likely, if you're playing against anybody that's worth anything, on defense, they're going to make a play, and it's going to result in not having a lot of success. I think some of it is technique. I think it's a difference in body types. Like, you had certain guys who are more probably power or man blocking schemes, and then you got guys that are more so fit for the zone. Like, and this coaching staff is going to have a mix of both. So they're to a certain extent, guys weren't always playing to their deficiencies, but I think the mix of them could never get any sort of flow. I think the rotation kind of hurt things, which the coaching staff has claimed that the rotation in a lot of ways was through injury, kind of forcing that. I do think to an extent that played a part, but I also think that they just never really could settle in on guys they should have committed. When they started making the move to Michael Carroll at right tackle against Georgia, that should have been, if you weren't fully ready for that game in Athens, that's fine. But he should have been, it should have continued to trend. But then they decided to go back to Wilkin Formby at right tackle. Then all of a sudden Wilkin slides inside permanently to right guard. I think it's I don't know. I think there was probably some differences of opinions on who should be out there amongst the coaching staff. Maybe that played a part. Maybe you got your offensive coordinator thinking certain guys should be out there. Maybe you got your offensive line coach thinking certain guys should be out there. Maybe, don't know for sure. But what I know is that when I would turn on the tape and try to figure out what is going on, why can't they run the football? It was constantly, okay, this guy missed this block. And if it was consistently one guy, then you could sit there and say, just bench that guy, figure out, get somebody else in there. But this time it's the left tackle. Now it's the right guard. Now it's the left guard. Now it's the right tackle. Now it's the tight end. Now it's the running back. Like, it would just constantly be somebody. You couldn't get everybody to come together and do their job consistently. And it just seems like that the one, I don't know, it was a constant problem all year. That is coaching, though. And that's something that has to be addressed. Don't know however they want to address it. It needs to be addressed. This cannot continue to be a problem. This run game was an embarrassment. One of the worst things I've ever seen. And it was so crippling in so many ways because you couldn't take pressure off your defense consistently enough. You couldn't take pressure off your quarterback. You couldn't take pressure off of your offensive coordinator. And blame who you want to, but the offensive line is where 90% of this stems, in my opinion. Or at least if you can get an effective run game, however you need to. Maybe the offensive line isn't all that great, but your running backs, Saquon Barkley, and can break a bunch of tackles and generate something out of nothing. Any way that you could consistently create yardage on the ground, if they could have had that, it could have helped so many other elements of the team. It's not even funny. And they just couldn't ever get it. And that is so disappointing. And I wish I could answer it better, but that's just, it is kind of a complicated issue that really I don't have anything definitive. It's rough. It was rough, but I appreciate you, Greg, once again. I love you. Thank you so much. John, I appreciate the 199 super chat. Both of our lines underperformed, offensive and defensive. Yeah, and that's the other thing I want to say here, because I was stepping out on a limb when I said Alabama would be able to I felt like Alabama would be able to run the football more effectively than people realize against Indiana's defense. That was me. No one else was saying that. That was me kind of stepping out on a limb. Boy, was I wrong. But the thing I didn't see coming, I thought Indiana would have some success on the ground, but I thought Alabama, really between the tackles and everything, I really thought, hey, like they've been good. Their defensive line has been good, and LT Overton, him coming back, and he's a good run stopper, and that kind of will put Keon Keeley and Jordan Renata in a more rotational role. They can platoon as that bandit too, and they got LT. Now, granted, from a health standpoint, I don't think that's exactly how it worked out because LT had been out for so long. But, second level, hey, Nikai Hill-Green, run fits are better. Yanze Pierre and Quay Russaw, their ability to play that shallow roaming off-ball linebacker, the wolf position when they're in that three-man front, better run fits, look more comfortable doing it. I'm sitting there thinking, I think they're going to be able to stop this run game fairly consistently. Average 4.3 yards per carry, but that's because Fernando Mendoza was sacked a ton for a lot of yardage. He had 8 carries for 16 yards. He averaged 2 yards per carry, and he got sacked for a lot of negative yardage in this game. I'm not going to go look. Actually, for 25 yards. Yeah, 3 sacks for 25 yards. That's going to take off a huge chunk and really hurt your average, but their two running backs their top 2 running backs average 6.6 yards per carry and 4.9 yards per carry. And then Martin, their number 3, he averaged 2.8. So he didn't have a great game. But the other 2 almost had 200 combined yards on 33 carries. And just I wasn't expecting them to be that effective. And so that's another one where I swung and missed. Got to acknowledge that. But that was a much bigger surprise to me than the other side of the football. Both offensive and defensive lines underperformed. But just about everybody underperformed. So can't really just put on those guys. Brandon from DC, appreciate the $4.99 super chat. The effort was there, but we needed dudes pissed off. They needed to find some a-holes that are leaders to change the temperature. Look, Miami took to heart what everybody said about them going into that Ohio State game, and you felt it. And Alabama was aggressive, but I feel like that their success on that first drive in a lot of ways was through scheme. It wasn't through anger, and we're gonna take the fight to Indiana. I think it was Kane Womack kind of having a pretty good game plan going in. Now, very quickly, when they started picking up the blitz consistently and the bodies that you were sending weren't getting home, I knew Alabama was torched. I knew they were done for. That is not good, especially when you've got Fernando Mendoza. But Miami went out there, and granted, having complete game wreckers up front, like a Reuben Bain and some of the cats that they got, that helps. That certainly helps. But, man, they played with a chip on their shoulder. And I did not see that from Alabama, and I didn't see that from Alabama really from the jump. And really when Indiana went on that really long drive, that first drive that resulted in a field goal, you saw Alabama defenders catching from that very first drive. And part of that's Indiana just being really good. But that told me, they're not playing with a chip. They're not pissed off. They would have told you that they were pissed off. They heard all the disrespect, and they knew. But we've been hearing a lot of talk from Alabama for the last several years, and we ain't seen much backing it up when they do. It's almost a bad thing when they start talking like that. They need some guys. They need some guys. And to me, we can talk about schematic fits. I'm all for it. I think that would help. But I think you need to go out there and get some freaking alphas. And it's not just guys that, hey, this personality, coach to player, we mesh well. I feel like I can get through to this guy. That's fun. But you need to have some dudes that you need to have some Rolando McClains, some Jonathan Allens, some Ryan Andersons, some Reggie Raglins, some dogs. I don't feel like Alabama, they've got some very, very talented, very, very good players. Dogs, how many dogs does Alabama have? Can someone tell me? Defensively especially, but both sides of the football. Name them for me, because I don't think you're going to name too many. I understand people might hear that and they take an extreme offense to it. I'm asking, and don't tell me you're a dog, but show me I think Red Morgan's a dog. That's one that stands out. That guy gets after it. And granted, I think from a size standpoint, there's limitations that kind of hold him back. You'd love to stick that mentality in a 6'3", 235-pound linebacker, because that dude would be ready to rip off everybody's head. But I think they got a lot of really good players that really want to do well. They respect their coach. They respect their teammates. They're good teammates, but straight up dogs, I don't know how many they really have, and they need to find some. Legend, appreciate the $9.99 super chat. This staff has a habit of getting embarrassed. Even in Nick's worst game, the other team was always the team to quit, maybe is what you're saying. For a second year in a row, they regressed. I don't trust this coaching staff to make the change. You're going to have to. You don't have a choice. Now, granted, I say that. This staff is probably going to be given the opportunity to make the change. I might have my questions, but I'm going to buy in and give them that opportunity, because there is no other choice, in my opinion. None worth anything. And we might all be pleasantly surprised. The last offseason, I saw a lot I liked on paper, and I promise you this offseason, I will find a lot that I like on paper. The difference between last offseason and this offseason for me is that there's going to be some things that I question that's like, it looks great on paper, but and we're going to need to see some things. And it's going to be a lot of fun in a lot of ways, but it's also going to not be an offseason that's very enjoyable from that aspect. I'm sure the team, they'd love to have positivity and everybody's supporting them, and And hey, and especially after they've taken steps in the right direction, they're probably like, wait a minute, like we're moving in the right direction and we can't get the support. Well, I mean, this team, it did have close to national championship caliber talent. Maybe not quite to the absolute best, but while it did improve, and I think we should acknowledge that improvement, I also think that it was capable of more. So I think overall it fell short. And so how do you as a program get to where you're not falling short constantly? Is, and that's they had some tough conversations last offseason. I remember them talking about it and it was not fun. Well, you need to continue that. And then you need to continue to make some changes because not even that worked. E-Branch, appreciate the $5 super chat. But are we really that talented? Running back room is not talented at all outside of AK Deer. Offensive line room is not that athletic. Some talent is overstated. Fair. From a recruiting standpoint, tell me how you end up with AK Deer, Jam Miller, Daniel Hill, Kevin Riley, Draylon Washington, Richard Young. You know how many top 100 recruits I just listed? I mean, I listed AK Deer, Jam Miller, Kevin Riley, Richard Young. You got another guy who is I think he was in like the 130s or something like that, but in Daniel Hill. Explain to me how you don't have a talented running back room. How did you miss that many times? Because running back is one of those situations where you'd love to have 3 or 4, but we know this coaching staff, if you just got one, they'll rely on that. I mean, they did it with Dylan Johnson in Washington. And maybe before, maybe that was supposed to be Jam. Maybe just the injuries and stuff hurt him just enough where he never turned out to be that guy. But somehow, some way, you took a room with that kind of talent in it and you went out there and said, we really don't have any good running backs, any consistent running backs that we can rely on. That's crazy. That's crazy to me. And it's the same thing at a lot of these other positions, like the offensive line. Granted, I think you did get impactful play from certain guys, but you start listening to everybody in that room and it's like, they should be able to come up with 5 pretty good dudes. How did they not do that? It's so yes, I agree with you. But that's concerning in itself in a lot of ways. If you've got a room full of running backs that are rated like that coming out of high school, you should be able to find bare minimum one really productive, really effective guy. And you didn't. Raymond Jama, appreciate the $1.99 super chat. KNW Jacobs, appreciate the $9.99 super chat. If Tai stays, do you think there's a chance he gets beat out? You've brought YO the money, but Mac looked bright when he came in. Granted, Indiana wasn't prepped for him. And yeah, I do think that plays a part. I also think that's a product of Austin Mack is a more toolsy, physical tools. He's bigger. He's stronger. I think he's a little bit faster, maybe. I think he's got a little bit more of a lively arm. I mean, we have to remember some people, and I didn't like the comparison. I don't think he's got the same rushing ability or volume or like a physical ability to be a volume runner like a Cam Newton. But you got to remember, some people were comparing him to Cam Newton. And so he's got a lot of physical tools. He's going to look impressive. I was impressed because when I saw him in some of these practices and stuff behind the scenes, as far as the decision-making and putting the ball in harm's way, I saw some concerns. I think he's made growth on that front. If you would have told me he's going to have to come into this game against this defense, and at that point in time, they're completely wrecking Tai Simpson, I would have not felt very good about his ability to have success. And yet I think overall he did impress me. 11 for 16 for 103 yards. Like, that's not bad. That's almost a 70% completion rate. Now, granted, Tai Simpson had completed 12 of 16, but for only 67 yards. But I mean, I don't know. The stat, maybe there's a quarterback competition. I would just probably go ahead and say if Ty's back, he's probably the assumed starter. And if he's not, they'll probably encourage him to go elsewhere because they won't want that for him. Yeah, that's how I feel about that, I guess. I'm close to 2.5 hours by myself talking nonstop. So A, my voice is starting to go. I can tell. But B, it's been a lot. So I hope that I'm not getting carried away from you guys. And I hope you guys are still enjoying this. I just appreciate everybody being here. There's still close to 700 people in here, and it's been close to 2.5 hours. It was a rough one, guys. I just appreciate everything y'all have done for us this season. We're not slowing down at all. We're going to keep it going. And like I said, I've complained a lot today. Tomorrow we start focusing on the solutions, and that starts with the transfer portal. And so we're going to continue to work super hard to bring you guys great content. Nick Preston, I appreciate the $4.99 super chat. Nick Saban left because he knew he wasn't getting these dogs in the trenches. Those are few and far between, and they're the most sought after paid. That's fair. Michael Carroll's a dog, though. That's someone that I probably forgot I should have included. He's young, though, so I think in the future he's going to help. And I'm sure there are others where if, like, as I'm working my way through it, because I forgot about Michael Carroll initially, and the reason I thought about him just now is I'm sitting here saying, well, they made sure they got Michael Carroll. That's a 5-star guy. He was considering, there were some people that were concerned that he might end up going elsewhere. They ended up getting him, and I think he's got dog in him. And I think he's going to be really good as he gets more comfortable. I'm really excited about him. But they're willing to go do it. They're willing to go pay guys and get the right guys in. What they got to, I think this staff does a phenomenal job of evaluating talent and just knowing, man, this dude's got some traits. We can work with this. We can develop this, and we could get a good player out of this. And I love this staff's ability to do that. What I would like to see is this staff learn how to find those dogs a little bit more and understanding, man, this guy might not, like, if I was going to watch Red Morgan with his lack of size and stuff, I might say, dude, he's a dog, but man, he's a little bit undersized. Will he get bullied? I'd have questions, but like, I feel like those types of guys are very, very, very important right now. And you've got to go get as many as you possibly can. And there needs to be that Tai might seem like he's demanding things of people, but he's not striking the fear of God in anybody. I don't know how many people on this roster, Rolando McClain, you felt that your life was in danger if you didn't do what he told you to do. If you didn't, and this cat could go out there and do some dumb stuff himself, and he still would make sure that you were being held to a standard and you were going to follow it, and you didn't question it at all. You didn't question any hypocrisy of that on the field and in the weight room and stuff. He followed, he did what he needed to do. But I just think that those guys right now are really important, really, really important. Hopefully they go find some. Who's her mama? Good name. Appreciate the $5 super chat. What does our offensive line look like next year? I think Caden Proctor's gone. Maybe I'm wrong. Like, I normally don't like pushing guy. I'm just telling you what I think. So I think right now it's Jackson Lloyd at left tackle. Gino Vandermark and Cam Dewberry both gone at left guard. Parker Brailsford's the one that I don't know. I'd love for him to be back. I do think he's got a little dog in him. I think the injuries probably slowed him down a little bit. Once again, these are like, as I'm working my way through this, he should have popped out to me. He's a dog. I like Parker. I really hope they can get him back and healthy. I think he can help. And I think that if they kind of embrace, now granted, if they lose Parker, I think that the next center, while he might not have some of the things or traits that Parker brings to the table, I also think that it's possible that due to being able to add more mass and size there, There will also be certain things that you'll be able to do that you maybe weren't able to do due to his lack of size. So there will be some trade-off there. It's like I wouldn't want to trade Jahad Campbell away for anything. But when they added Nakai Hill Green, one thing I said was, hey, I'm going to miss Jahad. I love Jahad. Always have. But his inconsistency with fitting the run game, Nakai is like a machine with that. And he's very reliable as far as his run fits. So from that aspect, Alabama should get more steady play out of one of its off-ball linebacker positions as far as the run fits are concerned. You'll just lose some other things in the process. That's kind of probably how I would feel about Parker. Well, but if they can get him back, that'd be awesome. Maybe you pay him a healthy amount. Don't know how high he'll go because of that size. Think he'll probably be a day 2 guy. But if you can get him back at center, that'd be great. If you don't, probably Joe Ionata will be in that conversation. Maybe a Will Sanders. Jimmy's talked about him. I personally like him at guard. I think from an athleticism standpoint, he got his feet wet this year. I think him at left guard would be where I would probably start. I think Olas is going to at least factor in there somewhere at one of those 2 guard spots. If you have to have him at tackle, okay, he does not probably need to be one of your projected starters at either tackle position going into 2026. The fact that he can provide an emergency option there is great. It helps your football team, but you don't need to be relying on him if you've got any other option on the outside, maybe on the interior. But I like Olas. I think he's a good guy to have in that room. And I don't know if that's left guard or right guard. With the way things have been trending, Will Conformby at right guard seems to be something that's probably going to happen. Michael Carroll, I would love for him to slide inside the guard. The way that I've told people on Twitter is I would bring in a high-profile offensive tackle out of the transfer portal. And I've been looking at a lot of them. I've been looking at some guys that maybe aren't in the portal. Not trying to – I'm not going to put a lot of that out, but I'm like trying to anticipate maybe who some guys that might enter that are at some smaller schools, going ahead and trying to get ahead of the curve. I've been really diving into some tape, but my thought process is you bring in a really quality tackle if you can. It's going to probably be expensive. I would more so try to pay up a little bit there. He comes in and he competes with Jackson Lloyd at left tackle. Maybe Jackson Lloyd ends up being that dude. I love Jackson Lloyd's talent. Definitely think he's going to end up being a good player, but you also don't want to completely bank on that. Could find yourself in another bad situation if you do and he doesn't end up providing what you need for him to. So you bring in competition there. But if you are getting effective play, like that transfer portal player is playing like you thought he would, his transition has been smooth, and you're getting effective play out of him, and you're getting effective play out of Jackson Lloyd, you can always move one of those players over to right tackle, and then you can take Michael Carroll and kick him inside the guard, which I would absolutely love him at guard. I think he's got a lot of high upside at tackle. I think he ended up being a high NFL draft pick as a tackle, but I think his highest upside is on the interior, and he's comfortable there. That's where he's mostly played. He had some problems as far as assignments and stuff playing tackle. If you could get him inside the guard, you wouldn't be asking him to continue to try to make that transition outside. I think it would just make things easier on him, and you would get a more effective play out of both positions. That's what I would do. I would probably add more than just one offensive lineman, but I think you got to get one bona fide tackle. And I love Bryson Cooley, and I love a lot of these guys they brought in the 2026 recruiting cycle. I think they have a lot of upside. You also don't want to put Bryson Cooley or one of these guys, have him immediately competing with Jackson Lloyd as 2 very young players, because I still think you're banking on a lot there. They're more developmental. If you end up getting, one of these guys steps on campus, he's ready to contribute right now. That's great. I think it only helps your offensive line at that point. But you need to have some assurances or some insurance there. And I think that would be the one position or one of the top positions that I would probably spend a little bit of money on if it were me. Don't know if the coaching staff will do that. I do think they're going to try to add bodies on the offensive line. I just don't know what that spending will look like to make that happen, but that's something to keep in mind. That's what I would do. I like a lot of these players. I think they could end up having a better offensive line next year, but I've been saying that for years. So there's going to be some hesitancy from me on that front. Hope that answers your question. We'll be talking about that a lot more, maybe even tomorrow when the transfer portal opens up. James Jones, appreciate the $5 super chat. Would like to hear what you think of DeBoer saying that there is a thin line between where we should be and where we are in post game. Would love to have more context. So let me work through that. Would like to hear what you think DeBoer saying that there is a thin line between where we should be and where we are. So he's saying they're not far off. Is that what he's saying? Am I understanding that correctly? Please don't do that, Kalen. Please don't say that. That sounds Hugh Freeze, we're close. Don't do that. I don't know. Surely not. It didn't look close. It didn't look close at all. And I thought it was the dumbest thing that Hugh Freeze kept saying it, because everybody has eyes and they kept seeing it. And I just wouldn't make comments like that. I would need context. This is not fair to him for me to be making some sweeping judgment off of that. I'm sure you're probably right, though, that some variation of that was definitely what he's probably alluding to. But I don't know, man. I don't like that at all. In some ways, I do feel like they're close, I guess, because if it's one guy, you know, if you got most of the guys on every play doing the right thing, it's just one, maybe one or two. Yeah, I guess you get those one or two guys fixed, but it's everybody. So they all got to stop doing it. I don't know. I'd need more time to think about that, James. That's a good. Appreciate you bringing that up, though. That's give me some homework. John Luke, appreciate the $1.99 super chat. I think NIL has made great players soft. Yes, and I can't say I blame him. If you hand 18-year-old Clint $400,000 a year, and now, I mean, I don't make $400K now. So if you'd have handed me that kind of money where if I want a vehicle, I could buy a vehicle. You know, if I you know what, I really want a nice place. I don't want to just get a place and, you know, I want to bring girls back to my place. I want to be not, man, I would be, yeah. Who's not going to money? Success is very difficult when you're content. And I think that these guys, what NIL has done is in most instances, I would say just about all instances, is guys are given just enough money to be content, but not enough money for long-term success. Like it's not going to set you up. It's not going to be generational wealth. It gets, you know, if your mom's working 3 jobs, it gets her out of that. You know, you can take care of your, you know, you got 2 little young siblings, can help you take care of them. Like it can do things for you. And that's what I love about it. That's the beauty of it. But it gives you just enough money where you get to kind of, everything gets easy on you. You know, there's not a whole lot of stress there, and the ambition. And no, I'll go ahead and tell you. I mean, there was a time in my life where I was trying to make it in this business, and it's tough. It is. And I wasn't making much money. I was struggling, you know, and I was fighting and clawing, and I was trying to build a winning mentality. I trusted people that had said, if you have it right up here, it'll happen for you. You've got to get right up here. You've got to take the right. And so I was listening to Tony Robbins all the time, and there was like this super big drive, and I still have that drive to this day because I had some really rough moments financially that I never want to go back to. I remember what that was like, and that keeps me very motivated. But I'm not desperate. Back then I was desperate. It was a different mentality. I'm terrified of ever getting back there, and that keeps me going forward and that's why I work as hard as I do. But it's the same thing with players. Like, I can't blame guys because the desperation is removed. You took care of mama, you know, you like anything you want in life. If you want something, you go buy it. Like, to some extent reasonable, but especially if you don't come from money, it has made players soft. And I don't blame the players for that. Anybody would deal with that. It's difficult. Greatness, and a lot of times it is bred through not great situations. It's not, you don't see too many people that just, oh man, I lived a great life. I had 2 parents that loved me. I didn't have any problems. And yet I'm super motivated to be successful. really all my motivation happened after I went through the rough patch because I didn't have mom and dad sitting there taking care of me anymore. I tried to go out on my own and do some of these things. And it wasn't until I experienced really rough times that I found my desperation and motivation. Players aren't dealing with that as much now. That's a odd rant, but it's getting late, so I'm working through it like I can. Bozavano, dude, appreciate the $9.99 super chat. I like DeBoer, improvement from last year. At least we kicked Tennessee and Auburn's butt. Good point. And Georgia's in the first matchup. We got steamrolled against a national championship strong defensive team. We need a new offensive line coach. You know what? That's another good point. Beat Tennessee, beat Auburn. You did get a win over Georgia in Athens. You beat LSU. You beat a lot of your rivals. You really did. And they got their teeth kicked in 2 of the last 3 games. But you did that to 2 teams that could end up playing in the national title. I don't know. Maybe Georgia's losing right now or something, and that sounds dumb. I really need to pull that game up. But still, it's how you lost. It's not that you lost. It's how you lost those games. You can't lose games like that. You cannot. Unless just something like if you are, if you've got Bryce Young and he's winning the Heisman Trophy for sure, and he goes down in the middle of a game and your backup's not very good or something, like maybe things fall apart on you. But when they are supposed to be the healthiest they've been, how do you lose? I can't imagine how bad they would have gotten beat if they had played them a couple weeks ago when they weren't very healthy. Could have been rough. Diamond Paint with Diamond Dave. Appreciate the $5 super chat. Talent doesn't mean you can just be plugged into any scheme. Saban recruited most of these guys for how they fit his style. I agree with that. That's fair. And that's why last year I had to eat crow a little bit because I thought, man, the argument that I made was this is still one of the most talented rosters in all of college football. I think Kalen DeBoer has assembled one of the most talented coaching staffs in all of college football. And I think from a resource standpoint, no, it's not Texas. No, it's not Michigan. It's not some of these programs, but it's still in a very healthy place as far as the resources and that, especially with what Nick Saban helped build and how he's brought things on and the facilities and all that stuff. Some of the best resources in college football. That's a winning combination. That was my argument. And then as I started to actually look at it, just because it's a talented roster and a talented coaching staff, you look at the individual pieces, like maybe not a schematic fit, quarterback being a great example. I think Jalen Milroe is a really good talent, and I think he could have had a way more success with the right offensive coordinator on the college level that fit his skill set more and was comfortable with that type of quarterback. I also think Alabama, even last year, could have maybe had more success if they would have had an experienced guy who fit the system. So all that ends up playing a factor. But at the same time, this year was a big step in the right direction. As far as like you got more of your, like the wide receiver room, Jeremy was a guy who was available last year. Ryan was available last year. You lack like the size and length, but they go out and they get Isaiah Horton to bring that element to an extent. You go out and you get a Derek Meadows. Like they infused what they needed at these positions to be more successful. And you did see more success. That's fair. And maybe that means they're trending in the right direction. But there was a lot of deficiencies. Speaking of that, by the way, just off topic, this is why I think Cedarian Morgan, maybe Derek Meadows, but more so Cedarian Morgan, I think is going to be so important for Alabama in 2026. Not saying he's going to be a starter, but I think he's going to be a part of that rotation. And the reason for that is you got to think, like Isaiah Horton brings the size and length element, but he's not really like this elite ball winner. It's not how he wins. You don't see him going up and winning 50-50 balls and, out physicaling, opposing defensive backs. Like I haven't seen him really do that at all this year. In fact, I've seen very few receivers on Alabama's roster do that other than Jeremy Bernard against Oklahoma. That's the type of catches that really can thrive in this Kalen DeBoer, Ryan Grubb offense. Isaiah Horton's a really good receiver. He could end up moving on to the NFL. but that's not, he did bring that element, but he didn't fill that specific role or element of this offense. So Darian Morgan is a straight up ball winner. He's going to play above the rim. He's going to be physical. And so having that moving forward, and I think Derek Meadows provides that a little bit as well, I think that's really going to help and add a wrinkle. And we'll be talking about that more throughout the offseason. But, you know, it's not just that they've taken steps in adding the size, it's that they added the right type of size as well. And I think that's going to be very beneficial. So kind of a random thing. It's just I posted that on Twitter a couple of days ago. I want to talk about it a little bit here. Perry, appreciate the $2 super chat. I tagged you in the DeBoer quote video. I'm so one dimensional. Yeah, I can't find it. I'm scrolling through. I got a bunch of, it was on Twitter. I will look for it, Perry, and definitely address it tomorrow. But that is very interesting. Diamond Paint with Diamond Dave, appreciate the $10 super chat. There's a reason these coaches do more with these low star players. Kalen DeBoer at Washington, Signetti with this Indiana team. Players recruited high, get paid high, and think they've already made it. They're uncoachable. One thing that Indiana said, I mean, everybody talked about the pressure maybe being too much for them, despite the fact that everybody was picking Indiana. And that should have given Alabama such a motivational edge. They asked the Indiana players this week about that, or about, do you still play with a chip on your shoulder? And he said, yeah, none of these teams we're playing now recruited us. We weren't good enough for any of these guys. That's what you're talking about, Diamond Dave. That's exactly what you're talking about. That's a different kind of chip, man. And that's why I kind of embrace some of these 3-stars that these guys bring in. They're still getting recruited at Alabama. They're still wanted in that sense. But am I talking a ton about guys, about the 3-stars? We discuss them, but I just went on a couple of minute rant about C.D. Morgan and his fit. Am I doing that for a 3-star right now? No. And I'm sure there's going to be some in there that come in and end up making an impact on London Simmons type. But I think that that's why I don't care if Alabama finishes with the number 1 recruiting class. Go get guys that fit, that whatever your system is, whatever your requirements are as far as the position, like everybody's got them, but then also dogs. And if that's a 3-star, I don't care. Go get him and let him come in with that 3-star dog mentality, wanting to prove everybody wrong. Red Morgan wasn't super highly rated. He was a 4-star, but he was a lower rated 4-star relative to a lot of the other people in the class. Michael Carroll started off as a 3-star. Yeah, I mean, that's fair, man. That is fair. Wealthy Future, appreciate the 99 super chat. If he comes back, he will be a 25-year-old 5th year. There's no more growth for Tai. There are no traits or upside that make him different from any QB on a roster or the NFL. He needs to move on, I guess. This needs to move on. Yeah, that's what that stands for. I don't agree with that. I think he'll be older. I think that hurts him. Tyler Shuck just went the 2nd round being older, though. We've seen other guys. It's not crippling, but there's no more growth. No, I think at times he was a little bit overwhelmed because of the speed of the game. He was still holding on to the football a little bit longer than he needed to. From a processing standpoint, like I still think that there's Tom Brady wasn't Tom Brady in year 1. And by the time he was done with his NFL career, the growth that he had continued to make for a majority of his career, if not all of his career, it's what made him so special. The way that his body was declining and his physical talent was declining, but the mental element of it really carried and compensated, even for guys like Ray Lewis at linebacker. It wasn't the physical talent that he was at the end of his career, but his mind compensated and kept him impactful even into an older age. It's like you give Tai the ability to do that, especially with what he does well. He was already winning a lot of the mind games, or he was effective at it. You get him back to being 100% healthy, get him, and he continues to get more comfortable and he can win more of those mind games, he can be lethal. So, I mean, granted, I'm not saying that's the route they need to take. I don't know. But to say that there's no more room for growth for Tai, I disagree. I think he's a first-year starter. He played half the year banged up and limited, where there's things that he probably saw and maybe wanted to take advantage of, but does he have the torque and the arm strength, the confidence to make the throw, or is he banged up? Like, we just don't know. So I don't agree that there's no room for growth. But I also will admit that I think Austin Mack and Keelan Russell are both two very talented guys. Very, very talented. And so I think they'd be in fine shape regardless of which direction they choose to go. We'll wait and see which direction they choose. So, and granted, I'm sure there's some people that agree with that, by the way. I'm just not one of them. I look at it a little differently, and that's okay. That's going to do it for all the super chats. I can only imagine what has been going on in the actual chat. I've had nothing but the super chat pulled up. I bet it has been wild. There's close to 3,000 comments in here. I'm sure there's been some people pissed off at some of the things I've said, and I had no idea that you were even saying it. That's going to do it for me, though, guys. I'm going to be back tomorrow. Can someone now, very quickly, someone that's watching, what's the Georgia Ole Miss score? Where are we at with that? Appreciate you, Way. Offsides. Appreciate you being here, brother. Appreciate everybody for being here. Okay, 21-12. Georgia's winning. That's okay. Ole Miss is hanging in a little bit better than I probably thought they were going to. And it's only halftime. Wow, that's good. It means I still get to watch a half of football. I thought this was going to be like late in the third quarter or something. This is a disappointing day, guys. Disappointing. I don't know how else to say that, but once again, it's not in me to be nothing but doom and gloom. It's all over. I still am going to figure out reasons to believe and reasons it can get better. And so that's what this channel is about. That's what I'm about. And so we've focused a lot on the problems. I've complained, but tomorrow I go back and watch the tape. We start focusing on solutions, what they can do. The transfer portal is opening up. We are not slowing down with the content. We're not. I'm going to go get me something for my throat, make sure my voice is on track for tomorrow. And we'll be back and discussing the transfer portal, discussing this game, and it is time to tackle the offseason. But I cannot tell you how much we appreciate you guys. Everybody, the people who send the super chats that most of those I end up reading, whether I agree with you or disagree with you, we can have our differences. You guys are family regardless. You are always here. You share your thoughts. The people in the comments, I can't tell you how much we appreciate it here. We're trying to grow this thing. We feel like we are moving in the right direction, and it's all because of you guys. Thank y'all so much for being here, and we continue to press on. Let's go see what ends up happening with this Georgia Ole Miss game. Once again, we'll be back tomorrow. Get on over to rowback.com. Use the promo code Crimson20 to get 20% off your order, and we will talk to you guys soon. Love you guys so much.